our voice and calling it out in all of its manifestations. Now, I wish to thank Executive Secretary Mora Mora for her report to the Council, and I commend her and the SIM for their tireless leadership and advocacy on women's rights and gender equality. The work of the SIM clearly demonstrates the importance of promoting greater representation of women in all of their diversity and positions of leadership and decision-making processes in post-pandemic recovery efforts. In particular, we would like to highlight the critical role played by the SIM as Secretariat of the Inter-American Task Force on Women's Leadership. For the past 4 years, the SIM has led the implementation of the task force agenda, successfully adapting its initiatives to better respond to the COVID-19 pandemic. Working together, the SIM and task force members have shown that joint advocacy can mobilize actors and elevate the voices of women. Plus récemment, lors du 9e Sommet des Amériques, le Canada était fier de co-organiser avec la CIM et le secrétariat du sommet
of this summit, this high-level event for women's leadership and democratic. Canada congratulates it, and the member state must help progress women's leadership in the Americas. At the next General Assembly, we're going to continue with these efforts to progress with women's rights. In our resolution and our actions, we must ensure an intersectional approach, recognizing the needs of women and children in all of their diversity and the obstacles they confront to achieve their human rights. We will continue to support SIM and the support of women's leadership and the rights of women and equality. Thank you, Madam Chair.
Thank you, Chair. My delegation thanks Executive Secretary Mora Mora for the presentation of the annual report of the Inter-American Commission of Women. We congratulate the Commission on the work that they have done for the advancement of gender equality and women empowerment. Regarding the content of the report, my delegation has a few observations, but in the interest of time, will not address all. We, however, seek further information regarding Section 5, particularly Agreement 3, which is following up on the proposal for the annotated working index of the strategy to support national women's mechanisms in mainstreaming the gender rights and diversity approach throughout the state's activities. My delegation notes that this mandate is only partially fulfilled as the SIM is yet to incorporate the experiences of the English-speaking Caribbean countries. We therefore seek clarification from the Executive Secretary as to the timeline set for the SIM to undertake this work. My delegation also seeks an update regarding the mandate issued at the 50th General Assembly, which instructed the SIM and Ms. Segvi to analyze specific impacts of the COVID-19 pandemic has had on women and girls in the Caribbean. Chair, Senusha has been and will continue to be a strong advocate for the SIM to be more active in the Caribbean. We have noted and have engaged the SIM Secretariat on courses offered that are inaccessible to the English-speaking Caribbean countries like Senusha, as they are offered only in Spanish. We are aware that work is ongoing in collaboration with the University of the West Indies in this effort, and we look forward to the outcome of this engagement. We have also expressed our observation and concern about reports published by the SIM, which have very little content on the Caribbean. We hope that moving forward, this will be rectified. Chair, on behalf of the newly elected Vice President of the SIM, the Honorable Dr. Virginia Albert Poyot, Minister for Public Service, Home Affairs, Labor and Gender Affairs of Senusha, we thank all delegations who supported her candidacy. The mission, along with the Vice President, the Honorable Dr. Poyot, will continue to champion the priorities of the Caribbean in the work of the SIM. I thank you.
Thank you, St. Lucia. I now offer the floor to Mrs. Neida Perez.
Thank you, Madam Chair. The delegation of Venezuela is grateful to the Executive Secretary of CIM, Ms. Alejandra Mora Mora, for her presentation of the 2021 annual report, and also extends its greetings to the Secretary General, Assistant Secretary General of the OAS, and to you, Madam Chair, and to the distinguished delegates who are here. The detailed report that has just been presented by the Executive Secretary of CIM it shows the policies, innovative policies and achievements, and a successful plan of action in a context of the Americas, which has been impacted by COVID-19, natural disasters, and unprecedented events. I've listened closely to what everybody said. I want to mention that the public policies of their countries, which reflect the progress and achievements, which can only can be achieved under the rule of law, which unfortunately is not the case in Venezuela. Madam Chair, protection of the right of women, girls, requires a safe, free, without violence. It's difficult in a country such as mine, without rule of law, without solid institutions and independent institutions to resort to seek protection and relief. This happens in the context of a complex humanitarian crisis, which also has undermined institutions to be able to ensure these rights. In the situation of inequity and violence against women in Venezuela has become, instead of improving, has gotten worse. And there's no statistics that enable us to have gauge the situation. Thanks to NGOs, human rights NGOs, which are more and more increasingly harassed by the regime. We have figures in 2021, 73 cases of persecution and criminalization were found in the following groups of victims: press workers and communication workers who are linked to activist policies, politics, and families of victims, and criminalization of human rights defenders. Migrant women as well is even more alarming. Their status of undocumented makes them particularly susceptible to gender-based violence. This is just a brief review of how the structural crisis that for more than 2 decades in our countries affects the most vulnerable population of our country, our women and children, particularly. Though the delegation of Venezuela deplores not being able to have progress in this area under a criminal regime. The challenge is to continue moving forward to reach the goal. And in the meantime, we will continue to work closely with the Inter-American Commission of Women and MESECVI, civil society of Venezuela, and with our institutional partners to continue shedding light on and providing support to women and children and girls in vulnerable situations as the highest priority. Thank you very much, Madam Chair.
Thank you, Mrs. Perez. I now offer the floor to Argentina.
Thank you, Chair. Our country does not have anything to add to the wonderful words of support we've heard to the efforts of the Inter-American Commission of Women and the Executive Secretary, Alejandro Mora Mora, he is aware of our staunch commitment to the values that she represents. Thank you.
Uruguay, you have the floor.
Gracias, Presidenta.
Thank you, Chair. Alejandra knows full well that everything she's been doing and is vital for Uruguay, to the region, and to the entire hemisphere. So there's no words of supportive words that I could say, further words, that is, but we support what's external, but when it's inherent, we become a part of it, and we want to say we're a part of this policy that she raises. Inés Castillo, we wish her the best. And she's going to have to wage this battle. It's an intense battle. It's a complex battle. She's going to have to wage. It's a tough battle she's going to have to wage in seeking equality and gender-wise between women and men. It requires the deepest conviction and a degree of active struggle on an ongoing basis, every day, every hour of the day, that is. And so the truth is, the results are encouraging, but with regard to society and what we aspire to and what we hope for, we're very far from where we want to. We're so far from achieving equality. And we could say that this has to become enshrined. We're good at the technical side of it all with the laws and everything, but when it comes down to the facts on the ground, there still is a huge abyss between the two. So we've been working over these last 3 or 4 days, for example. We've noticed that only 14% of women of the year have the same emoluments in ranks, in professional ranks, as men. I come from the world of parliamentaries, and women in parliaments are also a puny, a tiny percentage. Today, the representation with regard to the elections in Paraguay, I'm not going to get away from the topic at hand, but if you notice the list for parliamentary members of women, there's some, but their skills, there are irregularities that are used so that they don't actually come into office. It's not necessary for me to say that violence against women is gargantuan. It's just a huge problem. We're in a country every 3 or 4 days there's an attack of some way. People are killed. It's women. Is it women or men who do the killing? Who is it? It's the men. 80 or 90%, it's men. So men kill and women don't. That's an interesting fact. We see this very little. It's very clear that violence has a masculine component. It's men. It's overwhelmingly men who are involved in it. So we are going to do everything we're called on to do, and we'll make every effort to try over these times to improve the situation. Unfortunately, gradually we've been advancing. We have a woman vice chair who's completely involved in these areas. We have women who are very devoted to these tasks, and so we wish the best for this upcoming time, and you have our support. Thank you.
The floor to Spain.
Thank you, Madam Chair. First of all, I wanted to commend the Executive Secretary of the SIM, Alejandra Mora Mora, for her tireless work, as well as to the new chair of the SIM. I also wanted to take this moment to bid farewell to the Dominican Republic as the previous chair. You have Spain's political and financial support for the SIM and our commitment to equality in this forum in the OAS for the Americas and the Caribbean. As you know, Spain's commitment to this topic is the utmost commitment. Just one example of collaboration, I can talk about the courses for candidacies and that we provided funding. Spain commends the Executive Secretary for what's contained in the report about parity, the fight against violence, diversity, intersectionality, childhood protection for girls, reproductive and sexual health, the equal pay, and many, many others. As you know, the work is just beginning and it's very difficult. There have to be more women in decision-making positions and more feminist policies for the post-COVID reconstruction. Executive Secretary Mora Mora stated that we must act with urgency. We have to make sure that we are fighting against violence and discrimination against women and girls. This is not a challenge exclusive to this hemisphere. In Spain, we continue to move forward and fight on different horizons. So I urge us all to be very aware, as the pandemic displayed, all of our lives are interrelated. And the progress in some lives will also lead to progress in others, as we are on a constant path, the back and forth in our continents. And I wanted to state that equality will be one of the key pillars in Spain's chairmanship in 2023, the second half of 2023 in the European Union, as we look toward Latin America and the Caribbean. When we talk about equality and feminism, we're talking about the 4 pillars of this organization: democracy, human rights, integral development and security, nonviolence and peace. Nothing is possible without equality and feminism. To comply with this mandate, Spain will always provide its unconditional support. Thank you very much.
Yes, you have the floor, sir.
Thank you very much, Chair. I wanted to reaffirm our government's support for the Inter-American Commission of Women. In fact, our Minister for Women's Affairs, Gloria Garcia, is part of the executive committee. This is women who have been relegated throughout history. And in fact, we're in a historic moment. We have a woman president. Many of our senior level officials are women. We would like to thank Alejandra Mora for all of her support, all of the support given to Honduras in this area. Speaking of women, my government expresses its solidarity to Argentina in the matter of the attempted assassination of the Vice President of Argentina. We hope that such thing will not happen again, not just against women, but also against men and any human being. Thank you very much.
Van Gilchrist, Chair of the Permanent Council, Secretary General Luis Almagro, Assistant Secretary General Nestor Mendez, distinguished ambassadors and representatives of member states and observer countries. As I take the floor for the first time in the Permanent Council, I wish to greet you and to thank you for the warm welcome you gave me at the Organization of American States. It was a real honor to join the Council as Permanent Observer and to witness the vibrant work that you carry out to pursue the objectives of the Charter of the Organization of American States and advance continental cooperation. The special status of Permanent Observer that you granted to my country is an indispensable tool for us to nourish our friendship, to strengthen our dialogue, and to advance our work to address common challenges. Distinguidos colegas, me refiero a retos comunes.
Distinguished colleagues, I'm referring to common challenges that we are facing in this region. These are interrelated. Undoubtedly, the promotion of women's rights and gender equality is one of the challenges we face. The fight against inequality, discrimination, and violence against women and girls, and the promotion of women's empowerment require local, national, and regional action. They also require strong international cooperation. The Inter-American Commission of Women plays a crucial role in all of these dimensions. Italy firmly supports the SIM and specific projects for the Inter-American program to promote democracy and women's leadership. This cooperation is part of a broader commitment by Italy toward the objectives of the UN SDGs on women, peace, and security. I would like to thank the Executive Secretary of the SIM, Alejandra Mora, for this annual report and commend her on the work that was done in a very complex environment given the healthcare crisis that affected the entire world. Italy last year adopted its first national strategy for gender equality for the 2021-2026 period, and will continue to work with the SIM in the framework of its 2022-2026 strategic plan. We are confident that the upcoming General Assembly in Lima will provide opportunities for joint work to empower women. And for our societies to be able to work forward in a sustainable way and to improve society for all. Thank you, Madam Chair. Madam Chair, I am taking the floor to thank the SIM and its Executive Secretary, Alejandra Mora, for the notable work that they've done on behalf of women, especially in the fight against violence and improving women's economic independence. This is something we have worked jointly with them on. The work of this SIM is important for the European Commission. This is something reflected in the European Constitution. I wanted to highlight my country's commitment to the protection of women, respect for women in terms of health and economic and political opportunities as we move toward equality. This is part of France's foreign policy and national policy. Thank you very much. Thank you very much, Chair. We are honored by the kind words extended to us, and we would like to extend our welcome to both the outgoing and incoming chairs, who are extraordinary figures in their countries and in the Commission. I wanted to wrap up by saying that in the General Assembly, multilateralism plays a very important role as an engine of change for women's rights. If we're halfway across the river, we have to ensure that the boat continues to move forward. We have to marshal our efforts to make sure we're moving forward. Women's rights cannot be polarizing. This has to be a forum for a transformative agenda where we can find those things that bring us closer together instead of separate us more. And I think a multilateral forum is a specific place for this. Thank you very much, and I was very honored to have this opportunity. Thank you.
I once again thank the Executive Secretary of the Inter-American Commission of Women for the report presented, and through her congratulate the members of the Executive Committee, the Executive Secretariat, and the entire team of the SIM for the results achieved in 2021 in fulfillment of the General Assembly mandates and those of its strategic plan. The Chair suggests that the Permanent Council take note of the presentation of the 2021 Annual Report of the Inter-American Commission of Women by its Executive Secretary, as well as of the comments expressed by the delegations, which will be transmitted to the General Assembly at its 52nd regular session. There being no objections, it is so agreed. Agreed. Esteemed colleagues, as requested by the Permanent Mission of Costa Rica, pursuant to its note distributed as document CP in 9453/22, we will now proceed to the commemoration of the International Day for People of African Descent. As delegations are aware, the International Day for People of African Descent was celebrated for the first time on August 31st, 2021. This commemorative day aims to promote the extraordinary contributions of the African diaspora around the world and to eliminate all forms of discrimination against people of African descent. In this context, and to begin this commemoration, I will now request that the Secretariat show a video address by Ms. Marta Elida Gordon, Vice Minister of Foreign Affairs of the Republic of Panama. Please proceed, Secretariat.
Mr. Secretary General Luis Almagro, Maria Carmen Plata, Secretary for Access to Rights and Equity, Margaret May Macaulay, Rapporteur for the Rights of Persons of African Descent and Against Racial Discrimination of the IACHR, Mr. Ricardo Sosa Ortiz, Presidential Commissioner for Social Inclusion of Costa Rica, ladies and gentlemen, ambassadors from the OAS. I wanted to share with you the honor that it is for me to represent the government and people of the Republic of Panama in this high-level segment of the meeting of the Permanent Council of the Organization of American States, which for the second time is commemorating the International Day for People of African Descent and underscores the valuable contributions of the African diaspora as part of the Declaration and Program of Action of Durban, which creates specific measures to combat racism, racial discrimination, xenophobia, and related forms of intolerance, establish the pillars for the creation of international standards that respect and promote true participation by Afro-descendants in all public and private spaces in order to establish a new development agenda for our countries that includes each and every one of us equally. Eradicating discrimination is not an easy task because it is inherent to the vision of the world which has been prevailing for many centuries. However, culture is not static. On the contrary, it's dynamic and changing. Experience has shown us that it is through conscious efforts and the development of public policies that transformation becomes possible. It is this experience whereby we advocate here for for breaking stereotypes and breaking from the past. Ladies and gentlemen, the government of Panama would like to see here an unequal opportunity for pushing forward national agendas and to be objective about the fulfilling this decade of Afro-descendants that was proclaimed by the United Nations in 2014 based on 3 pillars: recognition, justice, and development. Historically, our country has proclaimed itself to be multicultural, multi-ethnic, multilinguistic, and cosmopolitan. And recognizing the painful rest of slavery, this requires us to be both consistent and conscious. We must work in reconciliation and re-encounters. Panama will continue to promote the adoption of measures that can deactivate persistent discrimination. Along these lines, we have a plan of action for the decade of African descendants in the Americas. This is crucial for pushing forward full participation of a group to which I belong that is strongly rooted in our continent. I am fully confident that today's commemoration will be yet one more source of motivation for our countries to marshal our efforts and to continue to work to eradicate racism, discrimination, and the historic invisibility that we Afro-descendants have been subjected to for many years. Starting in 2021 in Panama, we created a new program whose objective is to coordinate efforts to strengthen and promote public policies for inclusion through awareness raising with the participation of all stakeholders in Panamanian society. In Panama and in the design of Afro-descendants internationally, we created the first re-encounter between Mother Africa and our region, offering to the world our willingness to serve as a bridge between our brothers and sisters in Africa and the African diaspora. Brothers and sisters, we must create an effective sphere of protection for each and every one of our citizens without distinction and to fulfill the commitments we've undertaken internationally. Only in doing so will we be able to fight against inequality. And to conclude, I wanted to cite Victoria Santa Cruz, who had a poem called They Screamed Black at Me. And her poem talks about moving forward and praising the heavens because thanks to God, the blacks were created. They screamed black at me, and so what? Thank you very much.
Mission of Panama for making this presentation possible, and kindly ask that the delegation of Panama convey our thanks and appreciation to Vice Minister Gordon for her participation in this commemoration. Before we proceed, I would like to remind our distinguished panelists that each presentation is allotted 7 minutes. Your cooperation in adhering to the time is greatly appreciated. That said, I am now pleased to offer the floor to Mr. Ricardo Sosa, Presidential Commissioner for Social Inclusion of Costa Rica. Mr. Sosa, welcome to the OAS.
Thank you very much, and good afternoon. Ambassador Gilchrist, Chair of the Permanent Council, Secretary General Luis Almagro, Ambassador Nestor Mender, Assistant Secretary General, Ambassador Alejandra Soto, the Permanent Representative of Costa Rica, and permanent representatives of the member states and permanent observers. Ladies and gentlemen, roots are what we have to show in the context of the decade of the person of African descent and the Day of Black Person and their culture. I would like to start with a quote from the philosopher Jean-Jacques Rousseau, who says, "When a people ceases to defend its liberties and rights, it turns ripe for slavery." End of quote. The Afro-descendant community has been a living example of the peaceful struggle for their rights and freedoms globally, of a culture that claims the identities and roots of people both individually and collectively, strengthening the feeling of social and national and tribal belonging. This is just one of the reasons why from CELAC, Costa Rica supports the creation of an observatory for statistical data on Afro-descendants in Latin America and the Caribbean. It further supports the creation of a Center for Historical Memory on the transatlantic trafficking and reparations policies in the region. The debt is massive, and much needs to be done to fight for equality and against discrimination, access to credit and land, as well as to jobs and educational opportunities. These are part of the historical debt our country has owed the Afro-descendant population for decades. This is why the two examples mentioned, and even more importantly, are there to make visible the contributions of the Afro-descendant culture to our country. accompanied by inclusive policies for all individuals and inhabitants of this homeland, as well as with global political influence. It is important that these policies become a paradigm internationally. I will conclude my brief remarks with a fabulous phrase from the great humanist, journalist, and preacher from Jamaica, a global figure in the Afro-descendant community, Mr. Marcus Garvey, and I quote, "A people without knowledge of their past history, origin, and culture is like a tree without roots," end of quote. The Afro-descendant community has enormous and invaluable roots. We are making these visible and we must make them evident. This is our commitment to fight against all forms of discrimination and exclusion as a pluricultural and multi-ethnic country. Thank you very much, Madam Chair, ladies and gentlemen. Thank you very much and have a great day.
I would like to extend a warm welcome to Commissioner Joel Hernandez of the Inter-American Commission on Human Rights. Commissioner Hernandez, welcome back to the Permanent Council. The floor is yours.
Thank you very much, Madam Chair, Your Excellency, Madam Gilchrist. I would also like to extend my greetings to Secretary General Almagro and Assistant Secretary General Nestor Mendez. I am personally very honored to take part in this meeting as Margaret May Macaulay was not able to attend. She is the rapporteur for the rights of Afro-descendants and against racial discrimination. She could not be with us this morning. I am here in her stead. It is because she is on an official travel. I wanted to begin by noting that last year the IACHR published a thematic report on the economic, social, cultural, and environmental rights of Afro-descendants. This is a novel report because the IACHR presented for the first time a thesis on the intersectional and interrelated violation of the human rights of Afro-descendants and referred to the intrinsic link that exists between ESCRs and how making these rights effective is essential for other human rights. In the framework of this thematic report, the IACHR was seeking to promote new economic, social, environmental, and cultural rights in terms of the commemorative dates related to these rights. At this time, the IACHR emphasized the cultural rights of Afro-descendants and the recognition of religions from Africa in the Americas. The IACHR understands that Afro-descendant cultural identity is intrinsically related to the conservation of ancestral knowledge and the historical legacy. And so traditions and beliefs like the Lumbalu, Candomblé, Abakua, Umbanda, Odu religions, among others, whose roots are in Africa, are part of the heritage of the African diaspora and are framed within the social process of resistance that came about for those who were enslaved in the Americas. These cultural rights have been reaffirmed through different inter-American instruments, the American Convention, the American Declaration, and the OAS Charter. And specifically, this latter instrument mentions that states must give priority to stimulating culture to improve for the comprehensive improvements of human permanence, and that there is an individual and collective commitment to preserve cultural heritage of the American peoples, especially the right for participation in those sectors that have traditionally been excluded. In this context, the IACHR underscores the fact that on numerous occasions it has received information about attacks against the life and personal safety of leaders and practitioners of different African-based religions and states of the region, as well as reports of the destruction of temples and sacred spaces. The Inter-American Convention Against Racism, Racial Discrimination, and Related Forms of Intolerance indicates that states must prevent, prohibit, and punish any restriction or constraint on the use of language, traditions, customs, and cultures of any individual in public or private activity. The ICHR also underscores the existing link between the right of all individuals to participate in cultural life and the right to freedom of religion. According to the ESCR Committee of the United Nations, the person's cultural practices should be respected and protected. This includes respect for the freedom of thought, beliefs, and religion. The ICHR recalls that states must promote a respectful cultural environment for ancestral customs of Afro-descendant persons and adopt laws and administrative regulations that are aimed at ensuring the right of these ethnic and racial communities to practice their cultures, as well as eradicate prejudices and negative stereotypes. The Commission underscores the fact that the cultural expressions of the African diaspora are part of the historic memory of peoples, and therefore it is the state's duty to both promote and preserve these traditions. To this end, the ICHR calls upon the states in the framework of this international commemoration to adopt and implement concrete measures to promote the respect for African religions, for the religions of Afro-descendants, and protect the safety of their leaders and those who practice such religions. Thank you very much.
Hernandez, for your remarks. To conclude with the presentations by our distinguished guest panelists, I would like to extend a warm welcome to Dr. Gary Michael Denny, Professor of History and the coordinator of the African and African Diaspora Studies program at St. Mary's College, Maryland. Dr. Denny, you have the floor.
My best wishes to everyone, the ambassador, the permanent secretariat, all the delegates, all invited persons, and so on. Forgive me if I am a little bit unclear as to all of the protocols involved, but I am really very happy to be here. What I want to say is that we are in the midst of a moral moment, a moment that commands us to alter the moral universe that we inhabit, one where racial injustice confronts racial justice. And I say this if only because we can indeed, as other speakers have done, list the whole range of policies through which we seek to move from a situation of racial injustice to racial justice. And I support all of those policies wholeheartedly. Yet it seems to me that we need to reaffirm precisely why and how these kinds of policies are needed in the first place. That we need to understand the underlying platform of values which have now produced what you might call a community of conscience, wherein which you and I, and hopefully millions of others, engage upon this effort to transform the world from a place where injustice has prevailed to one where we can have racial justice. And I would remind you as well that when we speak of racial justice, particularly as it has to do with the experience of Africans and African descended peoples, that this has never ever been a zero-sum game. That in every instance where we have expanded the freedoms, and recognized the dignity of people of African descent, it has always been expansive. That is to say, incorporative of all other peoples. Okay, and so I want to, be insistent on the idea that the issue that we confront here is this moral moment where we recognize such a thing as right and wrong in the history of racial injustice and the necessity of racial justice. Okay, and so to do that, and to have what I would call a kind of intellectual honesty, we have an intellectual foundation as to why we need to recognize this moral moment as something that is really special. We need to understand that it didn't happen yesterday, it didn't happen 10 years ago, that this is a process that has been ongoing for several hundred years. But perhaps I would say to you that the greatest intervention in the intellectual transformation of our understanding of the necessity of seeing racial injustice as a moral quandary that we need to confront. No one better expressed this than the great Caribbean Prime Minister, the former historian, Dr. Eric Williams. In 1944, Eric Williams wrote perhaps the most important book ever in the history of slavery, called Capitalism and Slavery. And within that book, Eric offered 3 propositions. The first is that slavery created racism. The second is that slavery, the enslavement of Africans, was absolutely responsible for the enormous wealth which England and other European slaveholding nations would generate for themselves and would hold for the centuries to come. And the third point that Dr. Eric Williams would make is that when slavery ended in the British Caribbean, it was because it lost its profitability, and it had nothing to do with any kind of moral transformation within the English public itself. And so again, what we see there is that from Dr. Eric Williams, the history of slavery was a story of morality, the difference between right and wrong. And he understood from the very beginning that slavery constituted a moral cesspool which the British could not simply escape. Now, it would therefore turn to the people of African descent, those who were enslaved, and the children of the enslaved, and their grandchildren and great-grandchildren, to fight this evil. And within that history, we have had icons of the struggle. These include the great Toussaint Louverture from Haiti, the great Marcus Garvey from Jamaica, and it is inclusive, of course, of the great Martin Luther King from the United States. All of these men have fought valiantly against racial injustice, and their names, would remain forever in the collective memory of the African peoples and African descended peoples in the fight for racial justice. This new generation, this new movement that we stand in, has also produced heroes. Among them, I list the Prime Minister of Barbados, who not only calls upon the history of racial injustice for us to make sense of the modern world that we inhabit, but she also recognizes that past harms which demand reparations cannot be confused with new dangers such as global environmental racism, which has the capacity to destroy Black peoples across the Caribbean and the Americas, and against which we must stand guard, and whose motivations are fundamentally similar to the same motivations that brought the slave trade in the first place. So I say to you that when we celebrate African independence, when we celebrate African, Recognition Day, remember always it is a moral moment that we face. Thank you.
Thank you, Dr. Denny, for your very informative presentation. That's a former teacher of mine. I now offer the floor to the delegations, and I respectfully request that, in accordance with our rules of procedure, interventions are kept within the 5-minute time limit. I now recognize Antigua and Barbuda.
Thank you. Antigua and Barbuda welcomes this International Day, recognizing Afro-descendants and their contributions to every field of human endeavor. On his acceptance of the award of the Nobel Peace Prize, Dr. Martin Luther King observed of mankind that we have learned to fly the air like birds, to swim the sea like fish, but we have not learned the simple art of living together as brothers. Madam Chair, Excellencies, distinguished colleagues, Dr. King's lament reflects the sentiment of Antigua and Barbuda. We find it regrettable that while acknowledging the significant contribution that Black people have made to the building of the Americas, we must, in the very same breath, deplore the circumstances in which many continue to exist. It is no exaggeration to say that the Americas would not have achieved their levels of development without the forced labor of enslaved Africans, followed by the exploitative wages and conditions of work that their descendants were made to suffer and that many still do. Chair, the UN Secretary General, Antonio Guterres, has counseled all of us that it is essential that we speak up loudly and without fail against any notion of racial superiority, and that we work tirelessly to free all societies from the blight of racism. Antigua and Barbuda fully agrees. And that is why we have consistently identified the many acts of discrimination against Black people in the Americas, including unequal and unjust laws, economic inequality, denial of opportunity, marginalization, discriminatory killing by police, and other countless daily injustices. We have repeatedly called for an end to the scourge of racism in the Americas, and we make this call again. Madam Chair, Antigua and Barbuda congratulates the government of Costa Rica for spearheading this International Day of Afro-Descendants. This year, we have before us an opportunity to commit to the ideals and principles of this organization. The full and proper implementation of the ideals and principles set forth in our charter would make a difference in the lives of Afro-descendants in the Americas, if only we would do it. Antigua and Barbuda recalls that the OAS has in place 2 hemispheric initiatives that promote tolerance and respect for all races. One of them has established a plan of action for the UN Decade of Afro-Descendants. Providing money for the fund would make a difference to the lives of Afro-descendants of the Americas in the areas of recognition, justice, and development, if only we would do it. Antigua and Barbuda appeals yet again to all member states which have not done so to sign and ratify and implement the Inter-American Convention against Racism, Racial Discrimination, and related forms of intolerance. Madam Chair, the noble cause of eradicating racism rests equally on all of our shoulders, but they rest more expectantly in the hands of those of us who live in predominantly Black countries. These countries, before any others, should have been the first to demonstrate their commitment to this convention. Yet 9 long years have passed and only 6 member states have ratified it, 5 in Latin America and 1 in the Caribbean. Antigua and Barbuda thanks Brazil, Costa Rica, Ecuador, Mexico, and Uruguay for joining us in ratifying the convention and bringing it into force. But the absence of more than 25 of our member states is a stain that defaces the ideals that we collectively espouse. Every year that passes in which our predominantly Black countries do not ratify this convention provides an excuse for other countries to ignore it. Surely that cannot be what we want. And if it isn't, then why have our delegations not worked harder for the convention's full ratification by their governments? It would make a difference to the lives of Afro-descendants in the Americas if only we would do it. We urge, therefore, that this be the last year in which only a few stand up for the end to racism and racial discrimination that the convention promotes and advances. In the words of the great French philosophe, Jean-Claude Sartre, commitment is an act, not a word. Thank you.
Thank you, Antigua and Barbuda. I now recognize Colombia.
Thank you, Madam Chair. The delegation of Colombia would like to thank the delegation of Costa Rica for adding this topic on the order of business for today's CP meeting. And today, Afro-descendants in our region, there's discrimination and continues, and we want to recognize the contributions of the African diaspora, despite the international efforts against discrimination. These human beings are victims against racial discrimination, xenophobia, including all the contemporary forms of this, whereby there is violence in the manifestations thereof. And I want to say that the state of Colombia is committed to ensure for all inhabitants of its territory equal treatment, and regardless of their social condition, their culture, among other things, in observance of our political constitution. And on this note, we're trying to change the past discriminatory patterns that have endured over time. It is important there and appropriate for public policies to continue to create spaces of participation, inclusion, and respect for diversity, as well as for human rights. Our challenge today is focused on representativity of Afro-descendants, indigenous, in positions of power. That's why it is very important to Colombia and the region of our Francia Marquez, our vice president, who's an Afro-descendant woman, and she was democratically elected to this position, and also is in charge of the Ministry of Equality. There's many challenges, though, to deal with the issue of discrimination, which has to be resolved through the guarantee of fundamental rights, such as the right of access to education, health, nutrition, drinking water, decent job, etc. There should not be barriers to access of these universal rights. For this purpose, to ensure these rights, we have to reduce discrimination. The government of Colombia has implemented strategies to help historically discriminated groups and most vulnerable ones who have been relegated by society. And we've created the Ministry of Equality, whose responsibility is to attach a priority to these policies, prioritize in these areas. And this ministry creates the National Historic Reparation Commission to fight against racism. I have to say that despite the programs of the government are for all persons through the strategy of prioritization, all ministries in their areas, respective purviews, must deal focus on the poorest areas in these ethnic groups. So the government will try to provide full reparation to Afro-descendant raizales and palanquero groups who are the victims in the past of slavery and racism still. Lastly, allow me to point out that all the efforts are for the purpose of democracy and peace. As our Vice President, Francia Marquez, first Afro-descendant woman in such a high position in the history of Colombia. Thank you very much, Madam Chair.
Floor to Barbados.
Thank you, Madam Chair, Secretary General, Assistant Secretary General, Excellencies all. The quality of mercy is not strained. This quote is from one of William Shakespeare's most celebrated plays, The Merchant of Venice. The work, which was written in the 16th century, describes how mercy, an attribute to God himself, can save a person's soul and elevate him or her to the degree of God. The consideration almost sounds like blasphemy and bordering on sacrilege. Those of us who are familiar with the play recall how Portia begs Shylock to show mercy on Antonio by understanding his circumstances and situation. Antonio is a guarantor of a loan. He is liable for the loan, but due to unforeseen events, he cannot pay it off. In Portia's representation, she does not want to change the law, but she seeks to change Shylock's mind, pleading for mercy. She describes the power of mercy as being above the power of might. Now, Madam President, I begin my intervention in this deliberate way to draw attention to the continued social and economic plight of the people of African descent in this hemisphere and beyond. I ask you all here to not only recognize our folk and our ancestors once a year by expressions of remorse, lamentations, and flowery language, but to give tangible expression to our circumstances today, and to bring even more tangible expression to curing many of the ills that continue to plague people of color. We are fully cognizant that there may be little that some organizations and individuals can do to improve the plight of Black people in this hemisphere or globally. Every bit, however small, helps in a hemisphere in which people of African descent in some of the world's richest and most powerful countries continue to occupy the wrongs of those most in lack of social and economic resources. In two of the largest and most economically and politically powerful countries of this assembly, the states and provinces with the highest rates of poverty above their national poverty rates are also those with the highest percentage of Black people. This is according to the publication Economic Justice. Surely this paints a picture of a correlation between Black people, former slaves, and poverty and deprivation, even if not a statistical representation of causation. Madam Chair, as such, my submission on this important day of recognition and commemoration is that we move beyond these perennial acts of commemoration and to use tangible action to show up the existence of a people still suffering from the most horrendous act of man's inhumanity to man, which Black people have not been truly compensated for. The act of slavery has scarred our psyches, stalled our social and economic progress, and continues to impact the ability of many of our people to even form wholesome working relationships with people of other ethnic makeups. Madam Chair, we appreciate the act of commemoration every year at this time, but let it not just be an action that simply becomes ceremonial. We therefore make these calls from this chamber to convert much of the well-grounded and well-articulated intents into acts that do more to move our people forward. We don't and cannot expect an organization like the OAS to solve all the problems that plague Black people in this hemisphere, but everyone needs to do their part to correct the inequalities that continue to exist in relation to people of color. In this organization, there must be a move to have more people of color present and employed in this organization. The occupational ranks of this body must reflect more the composition of the membership of the OAS, not just in terms of absolute numbers based on the country's overall population, but in respect to the composition of the Permanent Council. It is critical that we remove the barriers that cause our people to be not to be represented in the workforce of these organizations. Not being initially proficient in the Spanish language should not be a reason for being rejected as a potential employee of the OAS. First, what is needed to start the correction of this imbalance, not just in the OAS, but right across the American system. IADB, PAHO, is a form of affirmative action grounded in equality and justice, but derived from mercy. We don't ask for a change in the law, but a consideration and appreciation of our condition that cries out for mercy. Every agency must do its individual part to forge this direction. We therefore hope that we can count on all members to support our submissions contained in the omnibus resolution that goes to the General Assembly this year. Madam Chair, finally, the final variable in this complex equation of human dignity and justice must be a commitment to the principles of reparations. This is a principle not well understood by many, but is the one true way to truly compensate people of color for the wrongs that have been committed against them. The simple definition is making amends for the wrongs that one has done by paying of money to or otherwise compensating those who have been wronged. We continue to make this call for reparations for the descendants of former slaves. We must be beginning in this hemisphere to pay reparations to the former slaves of this hemisphere whose blood, sweat, and tears have built the institutions of this society. Madam Chair, Germany continues since the 1950s to pay reparations to survivors of the Holocaust. Madam Chair, the quality of mercy is not strained. I'm obliged to you.
Muchas gracias, embajador Lynch. Tiene ahora la palabra.
Very much, Madam Ambassador Lynch. Now, Luz Helena Baños, Ambassador of Mexico, is recognized at this time. Thank you very much. My delegation is grateful for including this commemoration on the order of business of the Permanent Council. Mexico is a pluricultural nation that's enriched by the history of the different populations that compose it. They're back to the colonies. We have to go to find time of the colony to find Afro-descendants. This population is present in economic, political, social, and demographic processes in our country. Currently, the Afro-descendant community is over 2.5 million persons, which represents 2% of our total population. The government of Mexico, the current one, has paid off an historic debt with to Afro-descendants in reforming in 2019 the second article of the Constitution in recognizing the people, Afro-Mexican peoples and communities, and to create and to support just non-discrimination and equality. Mexico is committed to recognition and the promotion of the rights of these communities to ensure their free determination, autonomy, and development and social inclusion. The government of Mexico recognizing the Afro-Mexican peoples as entitled to rights and the architects of their own destiny. The Law of Indigenous and Afro-Descendant People, which was published in 2018, it was enacted then as the result of a process of consultation and dialogue with indigenous and Afro-Mexican communities and recognizes the right to diversity in the area, Inter-American area, we are a party to the Inter-American network of high-level authorities with regard to Afro-descendants, ADE-AFRO, whereby we have implemented the plan of action of the international decade of Afro-descendants. And in commemorating this International Day, we say that Mexico is committed to, even though there are, committed to these peoples and their rights, even though there are many barriers, and their history continues to be invisible, and we want to shed light on them. They continue to be discriminated against. Mexico urges all states of the region, those that have not done so, to ratify the Inter-American Convention against discrimination, racial discrimination, all forms of intolerance, as well as the American Convention against all forms of discrimination and intolerance. And likewise, Mexico calls on all countries to redouble their efforts to repay the historic debt and throughout our region, and recognize and promote and protect all rights for all persons. We hail the International Day for people of African descent, and we want to say that the presence of the Afro-Mexicans makes us stronger and gives us more energy and makes us more vibrant in being plurinational. Thank you. Pluriethnic. Thank you.
Muchas gracias, señora Presidenta.
Thank you very much, Madam Chair. My delegation warmly welcomes to this Permanent Council the different authorities from Panama, Costa Rica, the ICHR, and the history professor from St. Mary's College of Maryland. Guatemala also a country, a multi-ethnic and pluricultural country. Thanks Costa Rica for including this very important topic on the agenda, and thanks the invited guests. The Organization of Americans since 2018 created the International Day for people of African descent. And this has served to shed light on and recognize the contribution and participation of Afro-descendant persons in social development, economic and political and environmental and cultural development of the Americas. And also it encourages dialogue between states for positive things to be done to recognize Afro-descendants throughout the region and avoid discrimination. In this regard, I share that Guatemala has substantively moved forward in recognizing Afro-descendant population and equality by fostering measures to recognizing the contribution of these people. For example, in the Office of the Attorney General, we created a special office in February of 2021 to bring to the attention of this population in a particular municipality the Garifuna people. We have emphasized raising the profile of Afro-descendant youth in an updating process of national youth policy. In February of this year, as a result of an interagency effort, the Ministry of Education brought into the certification process the Garifuna Trenzadora women. And Guatemala continues to make progress in fulfilling its commitments of the states in the framework of the International Decade of Afro-Descendants. Last July, thanks to the coordination of the chair and to fight against racial discrimination, we held a virtual forum on the right of self-identification and strengthening of cultural identity of Garifuna women and Afro-descendants in the framework of the National Day of the Garifuna Woman and the International Day for people of African descent. And so we've moved forward in sensitizing and raising awareness and training public servants, civil society organizations, academia, and other sectors on issues related to the Garifuna people, Afro-descendants, as well as national commitments and international commitments on this subject matter. Guatemala continues to move forward in strengthening cultural diplomacy of the Garifuna people through audiovisual productions which are focused on the Garifuna people and Afro-descendants in the framework of the International Decade for Afro-Descendants 2014 to 2025, recognizing justice and development. The Ministry of Agriculture and Education conducted an activity which is called Harmonious Relationships of the Garifuna People in Their Environs. This is in compliance with the recommendations of the United Nations to seek agricultural development of the Garifuna people using a cultural appropriateness approach, and utilizing the ancestral knowledge of these people. This year's jointly, the Ministry of Culture and Sport held the 4th national meeting of the Afro-descendants and Garifuna people 2022 as part of the commemoration of the International Day of Afro-Caribbean and Diaspora Day. Madam Chair, Guatemala joins in to commemorating the International Day for People of African Descent, and in this spirit, this commemoration is we're very pleased about it and what has been achieved with regard to shedding light on the contributions of Afro-descendants to society. My country will continue to contribute through platforms that ensure their rights and participation without any discrimination in social, economic, political, environmental, and cultural development of Guatemala and in the Americas. Thank you.
Floor to Canada.
Thank you, Madam Chair. Today, we mark the International Day for People of African Descent and celebrate the heritage, cultures, and rich contributions that people of African descent bring to our societies. In Canada, the Black population is young, diverse, and growing. Approximately 1.2 million Canadians identify as Black, representing 3.5% of our total population, with more than 40% having been born in Canada. But this youthful population belies the deep historical roots of Black Canadians and the significant role played by the African diaspora in shaping Canada's history in not only defining Canadian multiculturalism, but also in shining a light on where we have fallen short. Indeed, in a statement last week, Prime Minister Trudeau remarked, and I quote, "Historical injustices, systemic racism, and discrimination continue to have intergenerational impacts on people of African descent. Addressing historic wrongs is an important step towards building a better future for all." End quote. And in addressing these historic wrongs, we must go beyond apologies. We must take responsibility as well, act to right existing wrongs, and work to prevent future ones. Le gouvernement du Canada s'efforce de remédier aux inégalités sous-jacentes.
Government of Canada is seeking to remedy the discrimination suffered by Afro-descendants, especially disparities when it comes to healthcare, racism, as well as systemic discrimination against Black people. Canada supports the work being done to improve vaccinations in the region, specifically insisting on improvements. We have contributed millions of dollars to provide services to the Afro-descendant population who need these vaccinations. And we've seen the same happen in Brazil, Nicaragua, and others. As we approach the end of the decade of the Afro-descendant, as declared by the United Nations, we will not abandon these ideals. We will continue to fight for equality for all. Thank you, Madam Chair. Thank you very much, Madam Chair. To begin, I wanted to extend my thanks and commend the delegation of Costa Rica for proposing the inclusion of this item on today's order of business. I also wanted to thank the panelists who shared important remarks, especially the Vice Minister of Foreign Affairs for Panama, the Presidential Commissioner for Social Inclusion, Commissioner Joel Hernandez Garcia, and Dr. Gary Michael Denis. Brazil has a large Afro-descendant population, and therefore we wanted to speak on this subject. The day we celebrated the 100 years of independence. Madam Chair, the commemoration of international days reflects the values of our society. In commemorating today, we have a unique opportunity to celebrate the contributions of the African diaspora to the world, specifically to our region, and to contribute to the elimination of all forms of discrimination against Afro-descendants. As we approach the end of this decade, I think is urgent that we have a collective response to racism in our societies to promote justice, recognition, and development based on the principles of solidarity, cooperation aimed at very specific activities. We urge all of the states of the region to support and to participate actively in negotiations in the UN Declaration on the Promotion and Respect for the Human Rights of Afro-descendants, based on the Program of Action for the Decade. Madam Chair, ladies and gentlemen, fellow permanent representatives, the fight against racism, discrimination, xenophobia, and different forms of discrimination is something that we have in Brazil. It's part of the plan of action. Brazil ratified the Inter-American Convention Against Racism, Racial Discrimination, and Related Forms of Intolerance. This is now part of Brazil's legal framework, is very similar status to that of a constitutional amendment. We urge other countries in the region to do the very same. We must be decisive in the fight against racial discrimination, and in Brazil we've done so in the passage of our latest constitution, which criminalizes racism as part of the democratic principles. We created the Secretariat for the Promotion of Equality and Rights to make this topic cross-cutting in all services provided by the state of Brazil. In 2010, in this context, we passed a law, the Statute on Racial Equality, the aim of which was to fight against racism. And tied to the structure from its creation, the Council for the Promotion of Racial Equality has sought the participation of organized civil society in the public and private sectors, academia, in coming up with public policies to fight racial discrimination. Along these lines, I wanted to wrap up by indicating that in 2022, we commemorated in our foreign ministry 20 years of affirmative actions in the Rio Rancho Institute. This is our diplomatic corps. The idea behind this program is to broaden access to young Afro-descendants to careers in the diplomatic corps. And 49 Afro-descendant young people have joined the Brazil's diplomatic corps. Thank you very much, Madam Chair. Thank you. We would like to thank the inclusion of this item on the order of business and to the speakers for your remarks today. We have taken due note of them. Madam Chair, as you noted in your introduction, the International Day of Afro-Descendants was celebrated for the first time in 2001, in the decade where the international community was invited to take specific measures to promote the recognition and development of this community. The history of the Dominican Republic is tied to its initiatives vis-a-vis the Afro-descendant community. Notwithstanding the conditions of slavery in which this community arrived on our island, we have seen their contributions in all different aspects of our society. They've contributed to daily life and our culture. The Dominican Republic has signed on to the most significant international commitments that consider guarantees of the human rights or the development of Afro-descendants, including the Montevideo Consensus, where we undertook the commitment with particular emphasis on groups in conditions of vulnerability. The Dominican state has taken on the commitment to commit to international agreements and has pushed forward policies and measures in this regard. In our country, in March of 2022, we had what we called the Diálogo de Tambores. This was an initiative that's part of the mechanisms that seek the implementation and compliance with the objectives of the Decade of Afro-Descendants. The idea was to recognize and raise the profile on the experiences of Afro-descendants in the Dominican Republic and to encourage full and equitable participation of Afro-descendants in different scenarios in Dominican society. These are strictly tied to the 2030 Sustainable Development Agenda, specifically 1010, which is aimed at reducing inequality and making sure no one is left behind. We also acknowledge that, like many countries in the hemisphere, we are up against major challenges to ensure that our inhabitants are more and more included and have access to education, training, and jobs. The Dominican government is working tirelessly to ensure this happens. We are very proud as a country of our efforts. This is reflected in all aspects of our cultural, political, and social life. Thank you, Madam Chair.
Offer the floor to Paraguay.
Thank you, Madam Chair. The delegation of Paraguay would like to express its satisfaction with the inclusion of this item on the order of business in today's meeting. That is the commemoration of International Day for People of African Descent, and we would like to thank the distinguished delegation of Costa Rica for bringing this to the table. We would like to also thank the different speakers for their interventions. This commemoration is an opportunity to highlight the invaluable contributions of the Afro-descendant community to the societies of the hemisphere. This is a contribution that has often been ignored, concealed, or disparaged. These communities have been the target of unjust discrimination over the centuries. We are very pleased to see the efforts that our states are making to correct historical inequalities. This is something that Paraguay is doing as well through different practices and policies that are seeking full participation by the Afro-Paraguayan community. We want to acknowledge their important contributions to the building of Paraguayan society through their rich traditions. These are concentrated in our country, primarily in the Ipamokwa, the Kapapakoe, and Ikamwam. There are treasures, cultural and artistic treasures. We are proud of those, and as a government, we are continuously promoting these. We also highlight the enactment of a new law that establishes mechanisms and procedures to prevent and punish acts of racism and attacks against Afro-descendants. This is something that was promoted by the national government through a secretariat. The aim is to recognize with dignity the Afro-descendant community in Paraguay, Afro-descendants who live within Paraguay who have historically been victims of discrimination and racism. On the same point, this new law criminalizes discriminatory acts and includes in our educational curriculum the history and participation and contributions of the Afro-descendant community to Paraguayan society. Last August 31st, on the International Day of Afro-Descendants, we created a working group for the implementation of this law. The idea is to promote broad dialogue through the Secretariat of Culture with different organizations and civil society that are primarily comprised of Afro-descendant organizations and other organizations who are seeking to implement the law. Madam Chair, the public Paraguay recognizes that there's persistent discrimination and racism against Afro-descendants in our country and in the region. But the enactment of this new law is one step forward toward greater inclusion of all the residents of Paraguay. Lastly, we reiterate our thanks for the commemoration of this day as part of this body. We think that the OAS is the perfect forum for such events so that we can move forward as an American content that promotes, protects, and is proud of the African footprint. Thank you, Madam Chair. Michelle Alexander held that we have not eradicated racial castes. What we have done is merely redesign them. And of course, that is a challenging look. But I think that position is somewhat attractive because we have to look at what's lacking and this very laudable path that we are seeking and that was brought to our attention by the ambassador from Costa Rica and putting this on the agenda. I am not satisfied at a personal level, and I am sad in my soul. I don't think we are even close to reaching equality for the universe of Afro-descendants. We have not come close. We must do a great deal more. We have to go beyond words. I have an 18-year-old son. I have others who are older, but my 18-year-old son, I took him to the Martin Luther King Monument here in Washington. I wanted to explain to him who he was, who this man was, what he did, and how he died. I'm not sure when we as parents are trying to educate and instill values in our children. When we talk about the Afro-descendant universe, what it has been, what it has suffered, and what it is owed, and primarily what it is owed. That is why the ICHR's task and that of the Redesca is huge. They are waging a battle in very difficult territory. I will likely not be around when equality becomes effective. And I speak of that with a great deal of pain, because processes should be hastened much more intensely by the different governments. But it's difficult for us to cut through bureaucracies and to grapple with some of the complex dynamics in our society. At the end of the day, when we're talking about recognition and rights, is something that is natural to the human being, and for some reason, some very troubling, wrong reason, was denied Afro-descendants. This is a continent, a hemisphere, whose identity is based on migration, free migration, not forced migration, as was the migration or the bringing in of Afro-descendants. This is complex and challenging. Beyond words, the only thing that is important is what is actually brought to bear. Each and every one of us should be able to report on our merits, but that's not enough. This is a gargantuan task, and we must tackle it with intensity that we haven't seen much in the past. The time is now. The time has come. It's because we are aware of what the problem at hand is. Every case of suffering, every case of injustice suffered by an Afro-descendant is something that must commit us all to the fight. There's not a single one of us who didn't see what happened to George Floyd and didn't feel shame, ashamed for all and of all. That is all I had to say, Madam Chair. Thank you. Thank you, Chair. Well, the Afro-descendant population is a third of the population of Latin America. They've been historically left out of public policies and have lived in impoverished conditions. They are more than half of the population living in extreme poverty. Afro-descendants have been present in the Americas since the times of the conquest. They have been part and parcel of the building of the states. In many cases, we've concealed or denied the contributions that they have made. The Afro-descendant population was violently taken from their continent of origin through the transatlantic trafficking of persons. They were brought to Chile during the conquest as victims of slave trafficking and brought to do forced labor. In many cases, it was in service or agriculture. Approximately 1/3 of the population of Santiago de Chile back in the 1700s was black, but 2 centuries later, we have a large mulata population. This shows the important representation of Afro-descendants. In Arica, in the north of Chile, the Afro-descendant population accounts for 5% of total population, and recent migration that we've seen has seen them move throughout national territory. Chile has a law that recognizes Afro-descendants, their culture, their language, their customs. This recognition includes the obligation of the state to recognize and respect their symbols and bring them in as a special category which allows for information to help promote equality. All of these measures help to reduce discrimination and social isolation. This community that has been in Chile for more than 400 100 years. And this because of the importance of this community and their humanity. We would like to thank all of the panelists who shared their remarks, as well as to Costa Rica for bringing this to today's agenda. Thank you, Tilly. I offer the floor now to the United
States. Joins others in this room and around the world in commemorating the Second International Day for People of African Descent, a day created to promote the extraordinary contributions of Africans and members of the African diaspora around the world, but also an opportunity to focus on the work of eliminating remaining forms of discrimination against people of African descent. In that vein, the United States continues to support the International Decade for People of African Descent and its pillars of recognition, justice, and development. Under the current administration, the U.S. government has elevated racial justice and equity as a high and immediate priority, promoting it across federal government agencies, policies, and programs, including our engagement at the United Nations and other multilateral fora such as this one. The State Department recently appointed Desiree Cormier-Smith as our first ever Special Representative for Racial Equity and Justice, and the United States looks forward to her participation at the General Assembly next month as we all work together on the theme Together Against Inequality and Discrimination. The United States strongly supports the creation of the UN Permanent Forum for People of African Descent to allow us to get at the root of the challenges and address structural racism while acknowledging the intersections of gender, gender identity, sexual orientation, disability, ethnicity, religion, and national origin. And as we celebrate the contributions of people of African descent across the world and in the United States, we must also take a more solemn note of the International Day for the Remembrance of the Slave Trade and its abolition on August 23rd. It is only by facing the painful truth of our past and not shrinking from our current responsibilities to address systemic racism that we will forge a better future. The U.S. government is committed to finishing the work left undone and fulfilling the promise of America for Black families and communities, as well as for all Americans. And I'd like to echo the remarks of Ambassador Lynch, who made the point that this is not work that can be achieved by a simple commemoration once a year. This is work that requires our attention the other 364 days of the year. As Dr. Denny said, we're in a moral moment, but it is a moment in this sense that must last years or decades if we're really to achieve our goal. But that is the approach that my government is taking, an approach that focuses on concrete actions, not just words, and a seriousness of purpose and urgency to advance racial justice and equity across the board, in education, in housing, in our economy, in our environment, in our response to the COVID pandemic and healthcare more generally, in our justice system, and in our democracy. We do this not because it is the right thing to do, or not only because it is the right thing to do, but because it is the smart thing to do and benefits everyone in the United States. So this work is a priority for the United States in many ways, from redressing racial discrimination in housing, to ending the private prisons that imprison young Black and brown men, to respecting the sovereignty of our Native American tribes, to combating xenophobia and discrimination against Asian Americans, and Pacific Islanders. And my government also recognizes how the COVID-19 pandemic and the ensuing economic crisis were disproportionately damaging to members of marginalized racial and ethnic groups, including people of African descent. And so we have taken steps that we know will particularly help Black and brown communities. To be clear, this is just the beginning. Ending racial discrimination, particularly in our criminal justice system, will be an ongoing top priority for my government. And we ask that other countries join us. The United States is not perfect, just as no country is perfect. We are aware of our flaws, but we can work together, both individually within our borders, but also collectively with our neighbors multilaterally, to stamp out the scourge of racism and racial discrimination once and for all. The United States looks forward to continued engagement with our hemispheric partners to find solutions to our common challenges, and we welcome further discussion on this topic at the OAS General Assembly in Lima next month. Thank you, Madam Chair.
Thank you, United States. I now offer the floor to Argentina.
Thank you very much. Just as I mentioned, because of the predominant culture that Argentina took a long time to recognize its place here. It was a population that was subjugated, discriminated against, and deserves heavy reparation for all of the outrages that it has endured. And I can also say that we've taken a long time in recognizing our belonging to Afro-America. Thanks to this, our government has created a national program and a national commission of recognition of all the rights of the Afro-descendant community of Argentina, and it's in the process of approving both international conventions. And therefore, we're indebted, but we're also on the way, on a way that I would dare compare to what the gentleman from Barbados said, to go from celebration to actual action. Thank you very much, Madam Chair. Thank you, Madam Chair. The delegation of Haiti is very pleased to celebrate together with the OAS member states the International Day for People of Afro-American Descent. In the view of our delegation, we hail that this item has been put on the agenda by Costa Rica. Haiti wrote one of the most unforgettable chapters in the history of Afro-descendants. It was the only successful revolution, the only black revolution that emerged from a slave revolt. So Haiti is the site of the negritude. The African American communities, the negritude, that's where it was created. History doesn't belong to us. It belongs to the world. It belongs to the humankind, because ideologies of equality, liberty, dignity belong to all of us. Noble aspirations which have marked Pan-Americanism, which culminated with the creation of the Organization of American States, of which Haiti is a member. We recognize and we appreciate the value of the efforts of the OAS to defend Afro-descendants in the Americas. We believe this is in line with the democratic values and recognition and respect for human beings, ensuring proper security and development and sustainable well-being for citizens. The whole commemoration of this day coincides with the Day of Solidarity and Liberty promoted by the OAS. Madam Chair, being free is one thing. Living in liberty with human dignity is something else. The black population are 200 million strong in the Americas, a third of the regional population. Nonetheless, Afro-descendants are the most vulnerable minority groups in the hemisphere, particularly in this context of COVID-19 pandemic. We believe there's so much left to do to value the contribution of Afro-descendants in the Americas. We have a moral debt of recognition and justice towards persons of African descendants. And our organization, in commemorating this day on an annual basis, must have more comprehensive programs and more effort from the member states that must work on health, education, on behalf of Afro-descendants in our region, we should continue to build and offer every citizen, no matter what color their skin is, being able to live without discrimination. And unfortunately, the struggle against discrimination and intolerance has to go on, and we will continue to struggle for full respect for the principles that are the cornerstone of our organization. The Organization of American States proclaims that social rights and social peace is the basis for a sustainable peace. And the Inter-American Convention Against Racism, Racial Discrimination, all connected forms of intolerance. We have a plan of action for the Americas. I take advantage of this opportunity to call on recognition and respect and promotion of the rights of Afro-descendants in the Americas, and recognize the major contribution in building our country. And it's important to give voice to Afro-descendants of our region. Thank you, Madam Ambassador. Thank you, Chair. Now, I really gave a tough time to the interpreters. I'm going to translate what I just said in Garifuna. Good morning. I'm always with you all. I'm not speaking as a politician or as a diplomat, but as a Honduran, a human being. I grew up a large portion of my life in the Garifuna community. Many know as Afro-descendants. My schoolmates from secondary school, I was among all these people. We were innocent. We didn't detect racism. We used to treat each other equally. We were happy back then. But over the years, as we grew up, the world changed. And as today in Washington, it's gray outside. We have this trouble here. I'm not going to use any terms that may offend. I'm going to be more religious, as John Paul II, Pope John Paul II said. Salvage capitalism arrived and took away the ancestral lands of our Garifuna peoples in Honduras to build for tourism and get rid of the human being. But that's not the only thing, because there was resistance from our Garifuna people. Of course, over these last years, it's been even more difficult for them. And there is some hope with a new hope for President Xiomara Castro, because she's a woman, and also she identifies with the ethnic groups as well, also with, including Garifunas, of course. And this has made progress because we're just beginning. There are Garifuna organizations that would like it to be quicker overnight. But it's a matter of time, money, and effort and work. And I believe that it's in the hands of our government of Xiomara Castro. No, but we don't resist coming together to commemorate the International Day for People of African Descent. Thank you very much.
Offer the floor to Trinidad and Tobago.
Good afternoon, Madam Chair. Excellencies, permanent representatives and alternate representatives, Secretary General, Assistant Secretary General, our distinguished panel of presenters, other distinguished members present, and of course our permanent observers. This is a very important commemoration, and I begin by expressing the appreciation of the delegation of Trinidad and Tobago to the delegation of Costa Rica for requesting the inclusion of this very important and timely item on our order of business. I also must express appreciation to the comments delivered by other delegations who so clearly expressed solidarity with the concerns that we all hold and the values that we seek to promote concerning people of African descent. To our distinguished presenters again, thank you for your insightful, instructive, and inspiring remarks. Madam Chair, Excellencies, the annual commemoration of the International Day for People of African Descent since 2021 has coincided with the anniversary day of the independence of the Republic of Trinidad and Tobago in 1962. This commemoration has therefore assumed much significance for Trinidad and Tobago, given our diversity and our commitment to liberty, equality, and equity, so forcibly declared in the words of our national anthem. The observance of this International Day from 2021 supports the argument presented by Dr. Denny that we are at a significant moral moment, and also his timely reference to the seminal work of our nation's first Prime Minister and father, Dr. Eric Williams, who the government of Trinidad and Tobago will soon memorialize indelibly with the installation of his bust in the Hall of Heroes of this organization. This delegation, therefore, welcomes this opportunity to reiterate the insightful and instructive conclusion arrived at by Dr. Williams in his publication, Capitalism and Slavery, that slavery produced racism, which was so extensively and eloquently articulated by Professor Denny. Chair, permit me please, though, to cite a bit further from William A. Darity Jr. in the foreword of Capitalism and Slavery, that for Dr. Eric Williams, and I quote, "Racism is an ideology that arose to provide a potent rationalization for wholly immoral but economically lucrative practice." End of quotation. As Professor Denny has asserted, and in the context of current social justice events and movements receiving global attention, clearly we are now at another such moral moment. It is noteworthy, Madam Chair, that the manuscript for the seminal work and flagship of many publications by Dr. Eric Williams, which is Capitalism and Slavery, was finalized during the preparatory process for the creation of the United Nations between 1942 and 1945, and it was originally published in 1944 ahead of the establishment of the United Nations. Capitalism and Slavery was therefore in 1944 a timely extermination of the voicelessness and exposure of the invisibility of the peoples of Pan-Africa, who were noticeably unrepresented among the 50 nations involved in the creation of the United Nations as the world's principal post-World War international organization for the pursuit of multilateralism and diplomacy for peace. Chair, Excellencies, today, while we need to continue to give greater voice and visibility to people of African descent, we must also seek to increase the value or importance that we assign to people of African descent. Therefore, the questions that we ask as I conclude that remain to be answered are: how valuable and important have we made the pillars of this organization: democracy, human rights, development, and multidimensional security for people of African descent in our hemisphere? This delegation is grateful again, Madam Chair, Excellencies, for the commemoration of this item on our order of business, and we look forward to continuing to raise not just the voice and visibility of persons of African descent, but also to giving greater importance or value to their circumstance. I thank you, Madam Chair.
Thank you, Trinidad and Tobago. I now offer the floor to the Ambassador of Bolivia.
Thank you, Madam Chair. And Jack Yusuf, in one of his speeches on the origin of inequality, he raises the question of where should the course of humanity move towards in the future. An in-depth analysis of how inequality emerged when one human being subjugates another human being and makes them their property and humiliates and uses them. And John Jackson said that the origin of inequality is the evolution of humanity, and it should have been towards equality, absolute equality, where there's no discrimination based on gender, no discrimination based on anything, but particularly no discrimination based on the color of the skin, which should be the worst and most aberrant of all discrimination. And along these lines of thinking, building a culture of equality, non-discrimination, as many countries have done, like the United States of America, for example, through important historic events, has done this. This is an act of great justice, even though we cannot describe what justice is from Aristotle to Kant. It's justice is what each one has to, and all human beings deserve this, and that's why today. That's why this commemoration is important. This plurinational state of Bolivia joins in this celebration and the commemoration of the International Day for People of African Descent. And we share with you that in our Constitution, 11 times there's mention of the rights of Afro-Bolivian, Afro-descendant peoples. In Bolivia, over the last years, we built the most modern laws with regard to the fight against racism and all forms of racism and discrimination, and we feel very proud about that today. Thank you very much, Madam Chair.
To the Secretary General.
I thank Costa Rica for the initiative and the chair of the Permanent Council to include this today. For more than 400 years, millions of women and men who are Afro-Americans were victims of the transatlantic slave trade, a deplorable chapter in the history of humanity. Forced to come to the Americas, these Afro-Americans and their descendants have continued struggling in all areas of economic, cultural, and political areas of life. It's important to recognize the contributions that they have made. That International Day for People of African Descent is an opportunity to promote the extraordinary contributions that the African diaspora has made to the Americas and to eliminate all forms of discrimination against Afro-descendants. Over the last years, the progress and recognition of the rights have been just the beginning. The Declaration of Santiago Dorma and the creation of the Permanent Forum of Afro-descendants as well. All of this to move forward, all pushed forward by Afro-descendant civil society and other professionals and academicians. At the OAS, we've been implementing several actions. For example, the creation of the Rapporteurship on the Rights of Afro-Descendant Persons and Against Racial Discrimination of the Inter-American Commission on Human Rights, implementation of the plan of the Decade of Afro-Descendants, and the network of authorities, the commemoration of the International Day for People of African Descent. Precisely in the context of the 5th day of the Inter-American Week for Diaspora, there's been talk of reparation, and it was very enriching, this talk. There's proposals that are from legal to economic. There's a proposal of the rights of Afro-descendant persons. We even talked about the reparation for what's necessary to Afro-descendants. we want to congratulate the efforts of the Department of Social Inclusion, of the Secretary of Access to Inequity, and the ICHR, the commitment to shed light on this and protect the rights of Afro-descendant people. And I also want to point out, in the very few countries that have ratified the Convention Against Racism and against all forms of discrimination and intolerance. Next year, it'll be 10 years since the convention was passed by the General Assembly of the OAS. We believe that we can and we must do better. The member states, those who haven't done so, they should ratify this. The Inter-American Convention Against Racism and Forms of Tolerance, the Inter-American Convention Against All Forms of Discrimination and Intolerance, both of these, ratify them to and join in this effort. Also, the member states, we need the financial, so that the decade, to fund the decade of the Afro-descendants and help the plight of Afro-descendants, and cooperating donors we call on to help us as well, and to be able to implement the plan and consolidate our efforts with the millions of people in the Americas. From the General Secretariat of the OAS, we've been working and fostering among the member states the creation of public policies aimed at this important collective goal that contributes to our content. And thank you very much.
General. If there are no other delegations wishing to make interventions, I wish to propose that the Permanent Council take note of the presentations made by the special guests as well as those of the delegations. Additionally, I would like to thank the delegation of Costa Rica for requesting this item on today's agenda. If there are no objections, it is so agreed. Agreed. The next item on the agenda is the consideration of additional invitations to civil society organizations, workers, the private sector, and other social actors to the 52nd regular session of the General Assembly, for which authorization by the Permanent Council is required, as contained in the report of the General Secretariat and the draft resolution in the revised version of the Addendum 1 of document CP Doc 5799/22 Rev 1. I would like to ask delegations if we are able to approve this draft resolution. If there are no objections, it is approved. Approved. Esteemed colleagues, the next item on the agenda has been included for consideration by the Permanent Council, acting as the preparatory committee of the General Assembly, pursuant to Article 91C of the OAS Charter. In this regard, I would like to ask delegations if we are able to approve the request from the Permanent Mission of Colombia requesting the inclusion of the topic, Declaration on the Peace Process in Colombia, on the draft agenda for the 52nd regular session of the General Assembly, as contained in document AJCP Doc 989/22. If there are no objections, the item, Declaration on the Peace Process in Colombia, requested by the Permanent Mission of Colombia, is approved. Approved. I request the Secretariat to distribute the revised version of the draft agenda accordingly. Let us now proceed to the approval of the following minutes. Acta 2341 of the special meeting of September 22nd, 2021. Acta 2352 of the regular meeting of December 1st, 2021. Acta 2354 of the special meeting of December 7th, 2021. Acta 2355 of the special meeting of December 8th, 2021. Acta 2356 of the regular meeting of December 15th, 2021. If there are no objections, they are approved. Our next item on the agenda is the farewell to our dear colleague, Ambassador Yolande Yvonne Smith, Permanent Representative of Grenada. Ambassador Smith presented her letters of credence to the Secretary General on January 24, 2019. During her tenure as Permanent Representative of Grenada, Ambassador Smith served as Chair of the Inter-American Council for Integral Development from January to June 2019, Chair of the Permanent Council and General Committee from July to September 2019, and she has been the interim chair of the Inter-American Council for Integral Development since July 6, 2022. Ambassador Smith, both councils have benefited enormously from your experience, knowledge, and diplomatic skills. I now offer the floor to the coordinators of the regional groups. I recognize the Dominican Republic. Ambassador, you have the floor.
Thank you very much, Madam Chair, and dear colleagues. I'm honored to speak on behalf of the members of the Central American Integration System, SICA, Belize, Costa Rica, El Salvador, Guatemala, Honduras, Panama, and the Dominican Republic. On the occasion of bidding farewell to distinguished Yolanda Smith, who's been working at this organization. I'm sorry. No, thank you, Madam Chair. Esteemed colleagues, on behalf of the member states of the Central American Integration System, Belize, Honduras, Guatemala, Panama, Dominican Republic, I'd like to bid farewell to Ambassador Harold Forsyth, permanent representative. Ambassador, the first one is Yolande Smith. First it was Yolande Smith. You are doing fine. On the occasion of the farewell to Ambassador Yolande Smith, who placed at the service of this organization her solid academic training and as a diplomatic with her experience in different agencies, defending the interests of our country, seeking solutions for peace, promotion of the rights of women, and consensus in situations, among other issues such as of high complexity in our hemisphere. During her time here at the organization, she has chaired the Permanent Council and CD, showing her great capacity to reconcile and contributing to the values that govern us and showing the value of the participation of women in leadership positions, specifically at this organization. Her chairmanship of CD has been marked by the priority she's given to the hemisphere, as well as best practices of the member states and on the topics addressed by this council, and with regard to regional cooperation and digital transformation. Ambassador, your country and should be proud of how you represented them within this hemispheric body. We are absolutely sure that in your new duties, your contributions will continue to redound to the benefit of your country and our region. We wish the most success to you, and I apologize for the mistake.
And Barbuda.
Thank you, Madam Chair. Madam Chair, I need hardly tell this audience that Yolande Smith is a remarkable person. She is tall in stature, as becomes the tower of strength that she is. In the brief time that she has toiled with us in the vineyard of the OAS, the fruits of her labor were obvious. She presided over the Permanent Council with consummate skill, directing our discussions and debates into productive channels. Additionally, she willingly assumed the chair of the Inter-American Committee on Integral Development twice, and also conducted the affairs of that body with aplomb. When she was in the chair, whether it was the Permanent Council or CD, delegations were assured that each would be given a fair hearing and that balance would prevail in all things. What many of us did not know is that while she was carrying out these very challenging tasks, she was virtually a one-person show. And not only a one-person delegation at the OAS, but also carrying out two other sets of onerous duties as Ambassador to the United States and non-resident High Commissioner to Canada. She fulfilled each of these tasks with grace and with style, always a smile on her face and never a trace of fluster or anxiousness. The ease with which she performed belied the heavy burdens she carried, mostly alone. Despite these already enormous challenges, Ambassador Smith found time to participate in negotiations on resolutions and declarations in this body, and in doing so, to bring always thoughtfulness and balance. She was, to me personally, a great ally in the cause of fighting for justice, for democracy, for civil and political rights, and for development. Her collaboration with me on resolutions to urge respect for human life in Nicaragua and to express deep concern about the threat to the legal international order posed by Russia's aggression in Ukraine were greatly valued, as was the work she did on ensuring that we got vaccine justice in the OAS by the resolutions that we put up on that matter. It would be an understatement to say that the Antigua and Barbuda delegation will miss her. We will. We say farewell to her with a deep sense of regret, but with overwhelming admiration. On this day, when we pay homage to Afro-descendants, we have been privileged to witness at first hand the consummate skill and superb performance of one of them, Ambassador Yolande Smith of Grenada. We wish her well in all that she does in the future, knowing that she has the qualities to stand tall and to stride far. Thank you very much, Chair.
Thank you, Antigua and Barbuda. I now offer the floor to Suriname.
Thank you, Madam Chair. And I want to address Ambassador Smith also. Many people don't like to say farewell because they do not like to leave their friends and familiar environment behind. Sometimes the person who is leaving may feel different because they may be looking forward to a better future or are happy to be reunited with family members or old friends. Those who are left behind may also feel sad. I will not go into the psychology of farewells because in a diplomatic job, there is no escape from regular farewells. I also do not want us all to get sad and maybe start crying but rather focus on the positive side of our job as diplomats. When an ambassador is arriving or leaving, it is always a good opportunity to reflect on our job, and I'm glad that at the OAS these two important moments are held high. People outside of the diplomatic world, especially the multilateral diplomatic world, often may not appreciate what an ambassador is doing. We all know the stereotypes of diplomacy, such as wine-drinking elites who are playing tennis and having a good time at the cost of taxpayers. But within this environment of multilateral diplomats, I do not have to challenge this uninformed notion. We all know that a multilateral job is in fact often more complicated than a bilateral job, especially if you need to get a majority for an issue or for a resolution. And we also know that the diplomatic job in general involves a number of skills which are often not taught in school. Having said that, we can now appreciate the work of our colleague, Ambassador Yolanda Smith, much better. You have all been able to observe her diplomatic and especially her multilateral diplomatic skills. She was chair of the Inter-American Council for Integral Development and also chair of the Permanent Council. Ambassador Smith, you have served your country, Grenada, well, and have done that for more than 25 years in the diplomatic service and also in other capacities. Thank you, Ambassador Smith, for your contribution to the work of the OAS and to the CARICOM caucus, and for being a pleasant and cooperative colleague. I think all of the Caribbean ambassadors and diplomats wish you all the best in your next assignment and in your personal life. Thank you, Madam Chair.
Thank you, Suriname. I now offer the floor to the Ambassador of Barbados.
Thank you, Madam Chair, Excellencies all. As you can tell, I'm fond of quoting Shakespeare, and that comes from actually coursing languages and being a teacher of English at some time in my life. And therefore, I want to start by stating what a bittersweet moment this is, taken directly from Romeo and Juliet. It is bitter because the person is leaving you, but sweet because we are convinced that we will meet again. And therefore, I am not good at goodbyes. I'm not good at farewells. I find them to be very emotional periods, but this is a very bittersweet moment for me personally. Today it was said that there are a number of women, females, sitting around the table in this assembly. And here we are losing another female from the ranks of the OAS Permanent Council. That's not to say that she will not be replaced by another female from Grenada. Who knows? But from Barbados, where the president is a female, the prime minister is a female, the deputy prime minister is a female, and with more females on the bench than there are men in the Supreme Court, it means that we are a country that truly value the contribution of women to the development of our societies. I personally grown very fond of Ambassador Smith. I can't tell you everything because we will be letting out supreme secrets. But I've become very fond of her character, her intellect, her self-assuredness, her supreme confidence, her superb skills of negotiations, and her forthrightness. I remember when she sat in the chair of this permanent council, many people must have thought at the time, because she was pretty new in coming here, that she would have been a pushover. Nothing could be further from the truth. Ambassador Smith has shown during the period she has been here her levels of intellect and integrity. She has fought for all of the issues that put Caribbean people in the right place within this hemisphere, whether it's to fight for people to eradicate poverty, whether it's the sense of understanding that democracy must reign within our societies, or whether it's a deep understanding that this OAS also stands on a pillar of development, which a number of people want to neglect. This is still, in many instances, a development organization, and Ambassador Smith was at the center of making that right. Ambassador, all I can do is wish you only the best. I am told that she is headed to bigger and higher places. We hope that the next time we see Ambassador Smith here, that she will be actually in a protocolarly session as the leader of her country. Don't count it out. Ambassador Smith, God bless, Godspeed. Great to have known you here in this environment. We'll meet again. Thank you very much.
Thank you, Barbados. I now offer the floor to Canada.
Thank you, Madam Chair. Ambassador Atsett could not be here today, so I don't have Shakespeare to offer, but I do have some personal words of farewell from the Ambassador to convey. We have been very fortunate as Canadians to work with Ambassador Smith, not only here at the OAS, but also in Canada, where she served in her first posting at the Consulate General in Toronto from 1995 to 1999. Here at the OAS, she has been a strong advocate for women's equality and empowerment. She has also contributed significantly to our work by chairing both the Permanent Council and the Inter-American Council for Integral Development. During the many months when we were meeting online, Ambassador Smith added another talent to her already formidable gifts. She had, in my view, and this Ambassador Atsett speaking, the most impressive background of any of the backgrounds we saw on screen, somehow conveying professionalism, warmth, and openness all at the same time. That also characterizes Ambassador Smith as a person and as a colleague. She approaches every issue with an open mind, committed to finding the best possible way forward in the interests of all of the members. We are very grateful for your work, for your solidarity, for your friendship. Ambassador, we will miss you. Best wishes for the future. Thank you.
Thank you, Canada. I now offer the floor to the Ambassador of Mexico.
Thank you, Madam Chair. My delegation would like to extend our warmth to Ambassador Yolanda Smith. She has a distinguished diplomatic career characterized by her leadership, especially when she was at the helm of the Permanent Council and SEDI on 2 opportunities. Ambassador Smith is an example of leadership and the many capabilities that women have to take on leadership roles. She has respect for the different positions of the OAS member states, which is not a small thing. I wanted to reiterate our acknowledgement of your incredible work at the helm of the Permanent Mission of Grenada, and you've shown the contributions of women to the OAS. Thank you for being an example. We appreciate you a great deal. Best of luck in your future endeavors. Thank you very much.
Trinidad and Tobago. Ambassador, could you please open your mic? We're not hearing you. Thank you.
Thank you. Thank you very much, Madam Chair. Madam Chair, I join other colleagues in saying farewell to Ambassador Smith. And I agree, I borrow the the very poetic lines from Ambassador Lynch. It is a bittersweet time. But let me begin by first expressing my appreciation to both the Dean of our Corps of Ambassadors, Ambassador Sanders, and to our regional coordinator, whose remarks really and truly said all that I could ever have wanted to say. Thank you very much. And Ambassador Smith, please know that I endorse fully those expressions of my deep appreciation for the time that we have spent here. 45 months. I've had the privilege of working with you, whether you were chairing the CD or the Permanent Council. You also represented our CARICOM caucus as our point person, our lead ambassador on matters for the SIM. And for Trinidad and Tobago, where we hold matters related to women and women in development and women's equity and empowerment and equality. You represented us remarkably well. And of course, I'm sure you would recall that seminar where we were pleased to listen to you, see your leadership, co-leadership together in seeing our issues advance and now receive greater attention on the agenda of SIM. I had also the privilege of serving with you on our CARICOM caucus security committee. And of course, if I use terms like rhythm, I'm sure that you and our Permanent Council chair would understand the easy flow that you have enabled in your very insightful interventions meant to bring us to positions of consensus. And for that, I express again my appreciation. You know, as I conclude, Chair, Excellencies, in the Caribbean, men, we have this way of referring to each other sometimes as brother man in speaking. And I had the privilege on one occasion when this most brilliant of diplomats from our region, absolutely brilliant, as displayed several times in her leadership appointments, and this diplomat who was able to make a boast that I certainly couldn't make in introducing herself, given her stellar representation of her country in a particular field, she referred to me in what I will never forget and which in a manner I will hold dear to heart. This was not another Caribbean man saying to me, brother man, but this was a Caribbean woman who I admired, who I admire, will admire, and respect, referring to me as sister man. I consider that to have been one of the most endearing moments in really and truly what has been a memorable experience working with Ambassador Smith. Ambassador Smith, I set no limits on where your path in the future will take you. And I offer you the assurance of my continued respect and highest regard as you go forward to achieve and fulfill your purpose in life. On behalf of the delegation of Trinidad and Tobago, I extend to you best wishes. Thank you very much for your service among us. Thank you, Chair.
Thank you, Trinidad and Tobago. I now offer the floor to the United States.
Thank you, Madam Chair. It's always a bit sad and strange, and yet it happens to us all the time in this career that you arrive as a newcomer, and at the very same time, people are leaving just when you're arriving, and the first or second times that you meet somebody, you're actually saying your farewell. And it's especially sad for me since you're my immediate neighbor here at this table. But nevertheless, on behalf of the U.S. delegation and the members of my team, we appreciate the opportunity to briefly express our gratitude for your contributions to the OAS. Ambassador Smith has shown in her leadership in both councils of this organization her dedication, and she will have a lasting impact on this hemisphere as she encouraged member states to engage in important discussions and share best practices on a wide range of issues. Her focus on digital transformation addressed the growing socioeconomic gaps created by the COVID-19 pandemic as every sector of the economy shifted to using digital tools. And her goal to minimize the digital divide will help build more resilient societies and impact our preparedness for future health and climate events. I know from the members of my team that she has been an important and highly respected permanent representative of the OAS who has contributed greatly to advance the important work of our organization. Ambassador Smith, your presence will be greatly missed at the OAS, and we wish you the very best in what comes next for you.
Thank you, United States. I now offer the floor to Uruguay.
Gracias.
Thank you, Madam Chair. I promise I will not be citing Shakespeare. There's no way I can do that. So I'll start with my heart instead. And I would like to just very directly express my affection in Argentina, Brazil, or Brazil, Chile, Ecuador, Uruguay, Bolivia. In that order, please, no one get upset. The truth is, Seneca had a concept where it talks about from the crowd, we get the concept of diversity. We all learn from each other, but some of us learn more from others. And that's the case of many of us. Persons like yourself, who has had a phenomenal diplomatic career, who works with great capacity to bring people in. These are attributes that you hone, that you develop, and then you consolidate in multilateral spaces. Some people have more vocation for bilateral relations, others for multilateral, and some are good at both. That is your case. You're one of those great cases where we can learn from you in the Permanent Council. That was the case with you. It's also your humanity. I look at your Facebook, and that's you. That is the person who shows who she is, who defends her country. We all do that, but that's really who you are. It is beautiful for us, and I'm sure very emotional for you, for us to stop along the way, tell you how much we appreciate you, how much we love you, and how much we are going to miss you. Thank you. Thank you, Madam Chair. And I wanted to take this opportunity to express very briefly on behalf of the delegation of Panama and on my own behalf my appreciation and acknowledgement of Yolanda Smith as she comes to the end of her mission. Ambassador Smith is one of the 8 women who up until now has been one of the permanent representatives here. She is an extraordinary diplomat. She spearheaded some of our most relevant commissions with professionalism, leadership, strong contributions, and solidarity in those cases in which the organization was able to highlight her championing of women's equality and the environment, and we share that all with you. Thank you, Ambassador Smith, for all of your contributions over the years that you have been here at the Organization of American States, but for your great humanity, your willingness to always offer support, your sense of humor, and that contagious smile that you always had, especially in times of great tension. It has been a great honor to share this time with you as you have represented Grenada with great dignity. I have no doubt whatsoever that your light will continue to shine, and I'm sure we will continue to hear about you. A very warm embrace today. Thank you. Thank you, Chair. I did not want to miss this opportunity to bid farewell to our dear Ambassador Smith. I would like to acknowledge her work as the permanent representative of Grenada to the OAS, especially her commitment to the region through her leadership in some of our political forum when she chaired the Permanent Council and CZ in 2019. For me, Madam Ambassador, it's important to point out your personal qualities that allowed us to work together on many opportunities to reach agreements to the benefit of our peoples and states. Your willingness to dialogue with all parties made it easier for all of us to work with you on any matter. And you made the work of all of us here much easier. For that reason, we want to wish you here the greatest of successes in your future endeavors.
Smith.
Ambassador Yolande Smith, on behalf of the Permanent Representative of Brazil, Ambassador Brandelli, and all of the colleagues from our mission, I wanted to thank you for the privilege of having been able to work side by side with you and to learn from such a high-level diplomat. You've already heard from our regional group. I simply wanted to wish you the greatest of success professionally, personally, and I'm sure this will always be to the benefit of Grenada. Thank you, Brazil.
Ambassador High, the floor is yours. You're on. We're seeing you.
Thank you very much, Ambassador Gilchrist. Thank you very much. I would not want to miss this opportunity of expressing my sincere appreciation for having a wonderful working relationship with Ambassador Smith. I had the rare experience of actually working with her firsthand in terms of a project that involved shipping computers from a high school in Northern Virginia to both Grenada and to St. Kitts and Nevis. At first, we had the opportunity for hearing the ICT professor actually address Dr. Ambassador Smith, as well as myself, and he brought with him a number of students to her embassy, where a very nice lunch was arranged. But seeing her in action, actually embracing the questions, the very difficult questions that high school students ask. These are very, very brilliant students. They all had training in actually gutting computers and repairing them and bringing them back to life. These are the things that many of you may not know, but she's a real expert in the technology area. And having her share that experience from the students with her and myself, which will also be conveyed with the students in the Caribbean, that to me is most noteworthy. Why? Because technology, in my view, is one of the dominant factors that are going to drive our economies. And to see the students get exposed to these very complex machines at a very, very early age was really very fascinating. The ICT professor brought 12 students with him for a luncheon, and it was amazing just to hear her fielding the questions from these students. That was amazing. But not only that, she worked with the military, the US military, for shipping those computers from her office at the embassy in Grenada, on New Hampshire Avenue, to Andrews Air Force Base. From there, they were shipped to the Caribbean. The first stop about 3 weeks ago was in St. Kitts and Nevis. And it was just amazing to see the group assembled to welcome that aircraft. It flew overhead, came in. We hadn't seen anything that large for quite some time. But to see it descend on the tarmac and having the computers delivered to us was really fascinating. We saw that firsthand. That aircraft would have taken the computers to Grenada on the next day. So the same thing would have been repeated next day. So on balance, I'm very delighted to have this opportunity for working with her because of the knowledge of her technology, because of the warmth that she expressed in interacting with folks. I know that she's going to take that with her to Grenada. And I think it was Ambassador Lynch had pointed out that do not be surprised if you hear of her again emerging at the very, very highest levels. So all the best to you, Ambassador Smith. It is a pleasure meeting with you and a delight to work with you and hope to see you again soon. Take care. Bye-bye.
Thank you, St. Kitts. I now offer the floor to the Permanent Observer of France.
To a great colleague and friend, let me say how much we have appreciated our cooperation and the outstanding work you have done at the OAS on many important matters. As was said previously, Ambassador Smith was an extremely professional, calm, and efficient chair of the Permanent Council, solving difficulties with patience and a lovely smile. We collaborated on specific issues regarding women empowerment or the challenges of climate change in the organization of a virtual event on the protection of oceans and on the blue economy. Ambassador Smith is a great ambassador who represents with dignity not only her country, but also honors all women ambassadors. On a personal note, I want to say goodbye to an exceptional friend. Dear Yolande Yvonne, with a double French name, I always enjoyed our conversations around so many common interests, your sense of humor, your loyalty, and your friendship. I hope we'll continue to see each other either in Grenada, which I'm dying to visit, or in France, where I'm flying back in a fortnight. Cher Ambassadeur Smith, chère Yolande Yvonne, nous vous souhaitons tous le meilleur pour cette nouvelle.
Thank you. Good luck in the new stage.
Dear Yolanda.
Dear Yolanda.
Concludes her activity before the Organization of American States, but also to a friend with whom we have shared important moments since her arrival at the OAS 3.5 years ago. I remember when you presented your credentials in January 2019, we agreed on the many activities that would be developed for the benefit of the Caribbean countries and especially the contributions of Grenada to our regional body. All of this has been achieved. In February of that year, you assumed the chair of the Inter-American Council for Integral Development, expressing your commitment to continue the work of CIDI in the areas of resilience and advancement of social and sustainable development. You also pledged to examine our response to the region's vulnerability to natural disasters and our level of preparedness and response to the effects of climate change. You lived up to this pledge as well. In July of the same year, you assumed the chair of the Permanent Council. In this role, you had the chance to demonstrate your ability and skills to build consensus. You had to deal with important issues related to democracy, human rights, development, security. You played an important role in coordination with the Caribbean countries and within them with Grenada in facing the unprecedented situation that the COVID-19 pandemic created. Our organization and governments have been working together since then on the implementation of the Action Plan on Health and Resilience so that we are able to adapt and respond and mitigate the impact that COVID-19 has had on all our countries. I have to say that my work wouldn't have been the same without you, without your advice, your charm, your intelligence, your capacity to listen and think. I cannot say enough how grateful I am. I admire you in every possible way. Maybe your charm and elegance are also part of that. You will keep inspiring people all around, wherever you are, whatever you will be doing. Thank you very much. Thank you for everything, girl.
Thank you. I now recognize Ambassador Smith. Ambassador Smith, you have the floor.
Thank you, Madam Chair. And I just want to say off the bat, I prepared remarks because I didn't trust myself to just go off the cuff. So please bear with me. Your Excellency, Ambassador Luann Gilchrist, Chair of the Permanent Council and Permanent Representative of St. Vincent and Grenadines, the Distinguished Secretary General, Dr. Luis Almagro, Your Excellency, Ambassador Nestor Mendez, Assistant Secretary General. Thank you. Okay. My colleague permanent representatives and interim representatives, alternate representatives, distinguished permanent observers, staff of the Embassy and Permanent Mission of Grenada in Washington, D.C., staff of the General Secretariat, and permit me, Madam Chair, in mentioning the staff of the Secretariat, to make certain that I highlight the staff and advisors of the Secretary General's office, the staff and advisors of the Assistant Secretary General's office, the staff that supports the Permanent Council, the Executive Secretary and staff of SEDI, the Executive Secretary and staff of SIM, the Director and the staff of DECO, all our technical team, the support team, the interpreters, the photographers, and yes, the security at headquarters. I greet all of you and those who are viewing virtually as well. Good morning to everyone. And I promise you that my salutation would perhaps be much longer than my remarks. That is because I truly believe and value people over process. I'm extremely happy to be here in person for my final Permanent Council meeting. The COVID-19 pandemic has stolen what for me is most important, and that's the interaction with people. And just in case you're wondering why over the past 2.5 years, whenever I come on virtually, my smile is so broad, I was just trying to make sure that everyone got that greeting as if I were greeting you in the halls. It was an experiment, so you let me know if it worked. I hope the experiment really worked. Today, I can end this chapter as I began on February 6, 2019, with great honor and humility as I address the Permanent Council, but with one marked difference: the experience I gained here at the OAS in the capacity as Permanent Representative, and that is priceless. I hope, therefore, as a matter of reciprocity, that my delegation contributed meaningfully to each discourse. Madam Chair, over the past 4 years, I received respect and cooperation in my chairmanship of the councils. I am fortunate also to have forged meaningful friendships with many of my colleagues despite the blow that was dealt to us by the pandemic. In my opening remarks in 2019, I spoke as the incoming chair of CD, and in bidding farewell today, I do as the outgoing chair of that said council, an unprecedented second time. I'm confident that the leadership of the delegation of El Salvador, and I know that you all will continue to show enthusiasm for the planned exchanges under the semester's theme of digital transformation. Madam Chair, to honor my words and to keep my remarks brief, I just have 4 points I'd like to make. And I'm sure Ambassador of Antigua and Barbuda would pardon me, I didn't share that with him before. And the first one is in the form of a request. And in making that request, I'm merely reiterating a call to action by Sir Ronald Sanders, the Distinguished Ambassador and Permanent Representative of Antigua and Barbuda, to seriously examine the OAS's charter to determine whether, as he puts it, it is fit for purpose. In essence, the call is to explore areas for revision. The charter was written and adopted before Grenada and many of the small Caribbean nations joined the organization. And while there were amendments over the years, we can agree that our needs and the realities of the member states have changed. Indeed, the geopolitics have changed in the hemisphere and globally. Secondly, and of course I will be looking from the outside in, I expect to agitate for and to witness a woman at the helm of this organization in the very near future. And I encourage us to challenge the data that Executive Secretary Mora presented to us this morning. Third, I appeal to member states to collectively advocate for equity in the budget allocations. And this will ensure that the peoples of the Americas continue to benefit from the programs and projects of the Secretariat for Integral Development. Forgive me if I speak from the vantage point of a representative of a small island and low-lying coastal development states with unique development challenges, or from that of a representative who is aware of the tremendous work and yeoman service of the Secretariat, having chaired the Council, but also having tracked the benefits that enhance multiple sectors of the Grenadian economy, and not to mention that of the youth and women. And fourth, Madam Chair, is to share with the Council that a highlight or a high point for me as permanent representative was participating in the Model OAS General Assembly for high school students. It solidified and awakened my passion for young people. And I know Ambassador Hull mentioned that that is my true passion. I was extremely pleased with the number of young girls who participated, not only participated, but who took leadership in that process. I commend the office that spearheads this program and encourage them to continue to provide these and other opportunities so our young people can hone their negotiating skills and to keep abreast and even become interested in the issues confronting our hemisphere. I expect to influence the powers to be in Grenada so that soon we'll be hosting one of these groups. Having dispensed with my substantive intervention, Madam Chair, allow me to personally thank the members of the support staff of the Grenada mission, all three of them. Ms. Rosemary Welch, the Councillor, Mrs. Simone Dowden-Valier, Secretary to the Ambassador, and Ms. Alice Roberts, Clerical Assistant and Receptionist. And perhaps to that I can add the staff, the alternates of the CARICOM caucus. They have been very instrumental in helping us to advance the work of the mission. I want to thank these ladies for the tremendous support they have given me over the past few years. Thank you for ensuring that the mission continue to punch above our weight class. I encourage you to also continue to serve and to fiercely defend our nation as we aspire, achieve, and advance. I seize this moment also to place on record my gratitude to the government of Grenada for this high honor for representing my country. Earlier this morning, the Honorable Prime Minister Deacon Mitchell spoke with the Secretary General. He reiterated Grenada's commitment to the work of this organization and the well-being of the people of the hemisphere. I assure you that the work will continue in my absence. In closing, Madam Chair, all that is left for me to do is to thank each of you for enriching my experiences here in Washington, D.C. It was indeed a great privilege to serve for the past 4 years as Grenada's representative to the United States and before this noble organization. But I know all of you would agree that what really keeps us up is family. So I want to say thank you to Simone, my daughter, and Brian, my son-in-law, and my two grandchildren, Madison and Ryan. And I just want them to know if they're looking at this sometime down the road, I'm wearing their bracelet. It says GG. And that's who I am at the end of the day. When I can take that hat of ambassador off, I get to be my silly self and be Gigi, and I want to thank them for that. I also thank God each day for his favor on my life and for affording me the opportunity to serve people with integrity throughout my career. I intentionally chose to acknowledge this great honor as one of leadership through service. And before I close, I just want to thank all of you for the kind sentiments that you've expressed today. And it shows that perhaps I wear my heart on my sleeve and you know me well. I thank you so much.
Thank you, Ambassador Smith, for your remarks. We wish you success in your future endeavors, and we thank you for your contributions to the OAS and to this permanent council. I will say my personal goodbye to you in the company of our sister man. Our next item on the agenda is the farewell to our dear colleague, Ambassador Harold Forsyth, permanent representative of Peru. Ambassador Forsyth presented his letters of credence to the Secretary General on August 11, 2021. During his tenure as permanent representative of Peru, he served as chair of the Permanent Council and General Committee from August 11th to September 30th, 2021. And he is currently the chair of the Subcommittee on Agenda and procedure of the Preparatory Committee of the 52nd Regular Session of the General Assembly. Ambassador Forsyth, the OAS Permanent Council has benefited from your legal knowledge, diplomatic acumen, and active participation in our deliberations. I now offer the floor to the coordinators of the regional groups. Pardon me, I recognize the Ambassador of the Dominican Republic.
Thank you very much, Madam Chair. On behalf of Belize, Costa Rica, El Salvador, Guatemala, Honduras, Panama, and the Dominican Republic, members of the Central American Integration System, with these words of farewell to Harold Forsyth, Permanent Representative of Peru, who, for more than 4 years, this organization in a worthy fashion. He came in the middle of the pandemic, and a few months later, he took on work from the Permanent Council, where his vast experiences were very helpful in achieving consensus and a constructive debate on the issues. He also advocated for geographical diversity in representation here. Ambassador Forsyth, we're sure you will continue to contribute to solutions, the protection of human rights, democracy, and the shedding light on the rights of women, the fight against corruption, among other topics, wherever you are, as you did during the time that you were here at this hemispheric body. We wish the most success to you in your new position, and you will always have colleagues and friends at this organization in our respective countries. Thank you very much, Madam Chair.
Uruguay.
Thank you, Madam Chair. In my capacity as coordinator of Argentina, Brazil, Paraguay, Colombia, Venezuela, and Chile, Ecuador, and Bolivia, and Uruguay, obviously, these honorable countries will also take the floor, but Harold is just a whirlwind of energy. He's so active. He's in a permanent state of building and action. The thing is to enjoy him and to learn among. There's different personalities. He's one of these type that you see him come in at first, and it's like in soccer. You're not really sure how to confront him, but the result is that he's a top-notch diplomat with a degree of absolute professionalism. And when he sets his sights on a goal, he puts everything into it. He goes with it and he achieves it. I remember in the Permanent Council when he began with the fertilizers. And we viewed it as a sort of as if he was on the moon, that he had landed on the moon in 1972. And with the FAO, and he convinced us all, and he got it into us that it was important for us to do that. Just like that topic, other things in the committee, in the purview of our region, for example, things he's done. Harold is exactly what we see, and that is of great value also. Often, the exercise of diplomacy requires sort of conformity, certain profiling, and certain shields, putting up shields, and we can't quite figure out what's behind the shield often. It's sort of a chess algorithm. Harold, though, is exactly what you see. And he is, and we can learn from him with his 40-some-odd years that, as Josue was saying, they were not in vain, those 40 years. Japan, Germany, nobody's been in these places. Nobody has the political confidence that he has forged. And we would have liked to have interacted with him a lot more. It was very quick. We would a lot longer. It would have been better. And then the humanity. we have a lot in common. We love soccer together. We love his son, and together with other friends here, we have other weaknesses. But we're all together. A big hug, Harold.
Thank you, Madam Chair. And once again, I do not bring the words of William Shakespeare or Maria Vargas Llosa. I bring the words of Hugh Atzett, his very personal words of farewell. And just like with Ambassador Smith, we also were very fortunate to know Ambassador Forsyth, not only from his work here at the OAS, but also from his previous posting to Canada in the late 1980s. It is hard to believe that it is only a year since Ambassador Forsyth arrived. He arrived with a tremendous amount of energy and enthusiasm and has not stopped since then. In addition to immediately taking on the role of the chair of Permanent Council, he has been the driving force behind a number of resolutions and initiatives here at the OAS and has been diligently preparing the ground for the upcoming General Assembly in Peru next month. Ambassador Forsyth has personal experience advocating for democracy. He has been a strong advocate for democracy and this organization's role in supporting democracy since his arrival in Washington. We are very glad to have been able to work closely with you, Ambassador Forsyth. Thank you for your excellent contributions to our work and best wishes for the future. Thank you.
Thank you, Canada. I now offer the floor to the Ambassador of Suriname.
Thank you, Madam Chair. Dear Ambassador Forsyth, you have been a career diplomat for most of your professional life, with a clear line of progress in your personal accomplishments. Since 2002, you have served as ambassador in different nations and organizations. You have also been a journalist for a short time and a congressman. From your CV, we can see that you have served your country well. We salute you with all these accomplishments. Ambassador, on behalf of the CARICOM Group of Nations, we thank you for your contribution to the work of the OAS during the period that you were here. We do not know what the future will bring, but we wish you and your family all the best and good health. Although we do not know much about the future, we know that most of us are preparing to visit your great country, Peru, and that's for the General Assembly of the OAS. We sure hope that we will see you in some capacity there, as we would like to get a good appreciation of your country during that period. Again, sir, we wish you all the best. Thank you, Madam Chair.
Thank you, Suriname. I now offer the floor to the Ambassador of Chile.
Thank you, Madam Chair. My impression is that if we talk about Harold Forsyth, there's three ideas that leap to my mind. First of all is camaraderie, because he's our, whether it's because I'm married to she's married to a Chilean, I'm married to a Peruvian, and we're neighbors here. And the last thing is that, and this camaraderie we saw from the bilateral meetings with a beer we had with them and meetings everywhere. And then when the presidents in Los Angeles, when the presidents of our countries met, we always see this. We thank you very much for that, Harold. Vision is the second thing I would say characterize it, because from the beginning to the end of the issue with the fertilizers, which is a topic that Ambassador Abdallah said we looked at the text, and that we could say that nobody doubts the importance of this issue, to have addressed this in a multilateral forum. And thirdly, commitment is the third thing that leaps to mind when I think of Harold. In our view, he, in his work for the General Assembly, all the things he did to pave the way for And as a matter of fact, we, in the context of the assembly, and I'm not going to, but I'm going to talk about Neruda and Machu Picchu, and I'm not going to cite Shakespeare or Vargas Llosa, but we're going to miss him, and we're going to really miss the presence at the General Assembly. Harold's presence will be sorely missed, and Yolanda as well, which I didn't have an opportunity to speak earlier. So I wish you the success and the best for you in the future. Thank you very much.
The floor to the Ambassador of Mexico.
Thank you very much, Madam Chair. My delegation bids farewell to Ambassador Harold Forza, the permanent representative of Peru, who headed the permanent mission to the OAS of his country. We are grateful for his interest to try his interest for the best of the states. With his career in the interest of multilateralism is highly appreciated because he was able to seek out and solutions. We are sure that Harold Forsyth will do this elsewhere, and we will wish him the best in the future. We remember him with his dynamism and his energy. Thank you very much, Chair.
Thank you, Madam Chair. The United States, and in particular,
Ambassador Harold Forsyth, permanent representative of Peru. I would like, on behalf of Ambassador Pendelich and all my colleagues from Brazil, right away, we wish you success in your upcoming challenges. Ambassador of Brazil in Lima, it bears witness to the quality of your professional diplomacy. All diplomats and ex-diplomats who serve in Peru, the best in the Americas, could benefit from academic and journalistic works and your vast experience in diplomacy as Vice Minister of Foreign Relations and Ambassador of your country to Colombia, Italy, China, United States, Japan, and more recently, just briefly, though briefly, to the OAS. And we greet you, and on behalf of the Brazilian delegation, we wish you success. Thank you, Madam Chair. Even though our coordinator and many who have spoken before me have translated the praise I wish to give to Harold Forsyth, but to Ecuador, it's essential to individually recognize him, and we do so, esteemed Harold, with much respect and affection and fraternity, our neighbor and colleague. And in doing so, perhaps I want to find the words that Harold Forsyth, on August 11th of 2021, that he said, and I quote, he was arriving in this forum with a great responsibility, which included the traditional solid integrationist in upholding the shared values of democracy and the full respect for human rights and peace and security and sustainable development of our peoples, close quote. This is how Harold Forsyth arrived in this, and he's more than complied with that. He is a person who has multiple facets to him. He's been a diplomat, of course, in his career, but also a politician, a journalist, a congressman, and he even had a radio program, if I've heard. And all has brought him to here, and he's been before so many different forums, and we benefit from it. I believe that this organization benefits from it a lot, out of his knowledge, his experience, his devotion, and Harold, no question, leaves a legacy at the OAS. We're going to miss him, and all I have left to say, your future is for the best, and leave the door open for the Inter-American system. Who knows, maybe you'll come back and we'll see you again sometime. Ambassador Forsyth, for you and all of your family, we wish the best for you from Ecuador, and hope to see you soon. And we always love seeing that wonderful smile that you have, and you have a hug of solidarity forever.
Thank you very much, Madam Chair. Before I took this position on behalf of my country, there were many comments saying that there weren't many good things at the OAS and that there were quite a few bad things. However, I think we have seen some of that today: mistreatment, lack of transparency. But after being here a year, I've seen something extraordinary. That is the warmth of each and every one of my colleagues. I think each and every one of our colleagues, the permanent representatives of the states, are the best representation of each of their countries. And in that, Harold, as we say, is the top. He has been a teacher to me. From the time he arrived in August, which almost coincided when I arrived in July, and at the helm of the commissions, he has always been aligned with justice and what is right. I will never forget the many lunches we shared, where we learned from both the art and science for us, those of us who had received specific training in diplomacy. Harold's great track record is going to serve him well in the future, not just to him, but to the legacy he leaves, the great expectations and the great possibilities that exist in this country. It has been an honor to meet you and get to know you, Harold. You will always have me as a friend in Bolivia. Thank you very much, Madam Chair. Thank you, Harold. I simply wanted to say that on top of everything that's already been said, I truly value your experience, your initiative. I appreciate you. Over this time, we've built a very beautiful relationship. And I would like to say publicly that I really extend to you a very warm embrace. Thank you, Madam Chair. Just very briefly. Well, actually, I'm going to speak in Spanish. At this time, as we bid you farewell, I wanted to say to you, Harold, how much we have appreciated getting to know you and working with you. In just over a month, we will see the opening of the General Assembly in Lima. Everyone is awaiting this experience to rediscover your beautiful country. And this is truly tied to your own efforts, your commitment, and your incredible diplomatic abilities. Ambassador Forsyth, my dear Harold, we will wish you very much, and we wish you the very best in this new stage in your life. Thank you so much, and a warm embrace to you. My dear Harold, in August of 2021, when you presented your letters of credence, you stated how important this entire organization was to Peru and your intention to continue with the diplomatic track record of your country here, the main political forum of the hemisphere. As soon as you got here, you got right down to business, taking on the chairmanship of the Permanent Council, and you showed your diplomatic acumen. Thanks to your leadership, Peru will be the host of the upcoming General Assembly, which will discuss discrimination and equality. I wanted to thank you for your professionalism, and thanks to your efficient management. We had Pedro Castillo came, who talked about the importance that Peru and the esteem in which Peru holds the OAS, the commitment of your country to democracy, human rights, hemispheric security, and integral development. I recall your leadership at the head of the commission when Peru was facing ecological disaster because of an oil spill. And as a result of the war of aggression against Ukraine, you made important contributions and talked about the effects of this to all the countries of the region. We met a short time ago, but we've already traversed a long road. I would thank you for your spontaneity, your friendship, the force with which you pursue all of your objectives. Thank you so very much. Thank you, Madam Chair. I knew that there were going to be some contradictions here today. There's a great deal of sadness, but also quite a bit of happiness, having heard the very generous words, some maybe perhaps undeserved, but I feel very especially tied to this illustrious organizations. To the alternate representatives of my country on this very emotional day for Peru here in this hall, as well as the generals and high-level officials of our armed forces. I would like to have them all stand and be recognized. Thank you. Mr. Secretary General, you may all take your seats, please. You talked about together against inequality and discrimination. This slogan came up, and the permanent representative from Chile also made reference to this. That may seem like a modest verse from a poem. It came up one night when I was modestly inspired by watching a television program. And I saw the very serious situation of marginalized communities in many states, in member states of the OAS, including mine, as a result of this pandemic that we've all been immersed in, and looking at the inequality, perhaps the clearest expression of inequality. So we saw discrimination had to be the other side of that same coin. How do we tackle this? Because it's not just about the persistence of this, but the fact that if we do nothing about it, this problem can become even worse in the coming days and years. And that's where I came to the word together against inequality and discrimination. If we leave our one grain of sand and put it toward this noble objective that will help us to join together and to move forward as a true community with shared interests, if we are able to put in our small grain of sand toward this, I will feel happy. The day I took over as chair of the Permanent Council, I would like to mention one of the results that was not mentioned here. A great event that we had when I was chair, the number of foreign ministers who came to commemorate the 20th anniversary of the Democratic Charter. That encouraged this spirit of equality in our region. What democracy means, rule of law, the protection and promotion of human rights. This is what the Democratic Charter is about, and we took that time to pay homage to the Inter-American Commission on Human Rights and the Inter-American Court of Human Rights, and in the Permanent Council we define the parameters for the elections in the 51st General Assembly held last year. A result, Madam Chair, was having achieved by acclamation Lima as host for the next General Assembly. I am honored to have been part of that achievement, which would not have been achievable without the generous and friendly support of my fellow permanent representatives, and specifically to the permanent observers with whom we have worked hand in hand from the very beginning as we have sought to meet our shared objectives. I know it's a bit late, but I would like to refer to something said by St. John Paul II. And I believe one of you spoke in Centésimos Annos, that encyclical in 1992. There was a phrase that struck me. This encyclical was dictated at the 100th anniversary of the Annum Novares from Leon XIII. And Saint Juan Pablo II talks in that encyclical about the preferential treatment of poverty. If we do not attack inequality, we will be doing a dishonor to the important words of the Pope, which has such a deep meaning and which should be a paradigm and parameter for the future work of the Organization of American States. You all know that in recent weeks I presented my letter of resignation. I would have loved to be here 2 years. That was my original intent. But the Lord above had different ideas. A warm embrace and recognition to my dear friend of many years, Mr. Secretary General, to all of the members of this very competent General Secretariat that came up with more rights for more people. But we need rights to have a true, forceful meaning. People have to have the ability to assert those rights, and that's why it is so important to fight against discrimination and to fight against inequality in terms of the preferential options for the poor. To all of you here, the best is yet to come for all of you and for me. This is just the beginning. Farewell. Thank you, Madam Chair. This mission would like to express, in terms of what happened in our sister Republic of Argentina, the road to violence is always traumatic, anti-democratic, painful, and offends us all. We must insist, as Luis Lacalle Pou, our president, stated, violence can never be tolerated under any circumstance. His words speak for all of Uruguay. And for that reason, my country extends its solidarity to Argentina, given what happened. We must continue to build respect, tolerance, and civility. And the present must be beaten by the future. And the furious past comes to the present with anger and fury. The challenge is enormous, but we must fight for peace. Peace is the basis for freedom. Without this base, there can be no liberty, and we're not always clear about the need. Peace for liberty, liberty for peace, and so on and so on. These are Uruguay's words in the context of that event. Thank you, Madam Chair. I would like to express our solidarity with the Vice President, Maria Cristina Fernandez de Kirchner, through our Ambassador, Carlos Raimundi. We extend a warm embrace. The people of Bolivia feel very close to you and are sorry for this attempt against the life of the second highest authority. This is something that should be reproached by all those who support democracy. We must seek peace over violence. That is our duty as the Permanent Council of the Organization of American States. Raise our voice against any type of hate. And the person who is key to the political life in Argentina and in Latin America in recent years. Cristina Fernandez de Kirchner is a woman who represents the strength of her people. She has she has shifted paradigms in Argentina and has worked on behalf of all Argentinians. And she gave continuity to the presidency of Nestor Kirchner and implemented the most significant policies in recent times, reaching the lowest levels of poverty ever recorded, 4.7% in her country. She strengthened the domestic market and consolidated democracy, broadening rights for all those in Argentina. She deepened democracy through many of her programs, all this to the benefit of Argentinians. She spearheaded one of the most important reforms and educational reforms that conceived education as a social right. She worked toward the redistribution of wealth through different social policies that are too numerous to list. She is an example for the entire region. She had inclusive foreign policy and strong participation in UNASUR, promoting a common market for the South, Mercosur. She had great support in her diplomatic support for las Islas Malvinas. As I said before, Cristina Fernandez Kirchner significantly improved the lives of Argentinians. A woman like this deserves respect, and the respect for her life. A woman and a leader like she deserves all international support in the face of this attack. And it is there, but for the grace of God, she would have been, her life may have ended. We express our solidarity with Argentina, and this act of violence is something that should be vehemently condemned by the Permanent Council. Thank you. Madam Chair, Mexico energetically condemns the attempted assassination of Vice President Cristina Fernandez on September 1st. This terrible violence in these circumstances. My government expresses full solidarity with Cristina Fernandez and with the people and government of their sister Republic of Argentina. To Ambassador Carlos Raimundi, we express our solidarity and we desire a long life for the Vice President. Her leadership is greatly appreciated by us all. Thank you very much. Thank you, Madam Chair. The delegation of Panama joins in the expressions of condemnation and repudiation of all violence and aggression. And for this reason, we reiterate our condemnation of the failed assassination attempt against Cristina Fernandez de Kirchner in the city of Buenos Aires. In the face of this unfortunate episode, Panama expresses its solidarity to the people of Argentina and takes this opportunity to call on us all to ponder the increased violence because of hate speech. We must always let social harmony prevail and ensure that the pillars enshrined in the OAS Charter shine. And we express our solidarity with Ambassador Raimundi. Thank you, Madam Chair. On behalf of the Dominican government, I would like to express our decisive condemnation of any type of violence, such as what we saw happen in Argentina, and in any environment that inflames tensions and violence. This attempt against Cristina Fernandez's life must be brought to justice. The Argentinian society is going to continue to strengthen its democracy and consolidate peace. Thank you, Madam Chair. A few hours ago, we expressed our condemnation of the assassination attempt against the Vice President of Argentina. We express our support for Ambassador Raimundi and the people of Argentina. We must care for democracy and defend them. Have societies where people can express their differences. On September 4th, in Chile, there was a constitutional referendum where 62% of people rejected the new constitution that was drafted by a constitutional assembly. This plebiscite, two plebiscites, might seem contradictory, but they are not so. President Boric has stated that the people's will is clear. Well, in 1973 and 1980, during a dictatorship, Pinochet imposed a constitution, and this created a crisis. Perhaps the process in Chile, as President Boric was saying, shows deep conflicts that are part of democracy. And the second message is that the people of Chile were not satisfied with the option given to them, and so there will be future plebiscites so that there is continuity and there will be a new draft text put to the people. Yesterday afternoon, political parties from the government and opposition came together in the Palacio de la Moneda to meet and look at the procedures for moving forward toward a change in our Constitution. Thank you. Thank you, Madam Chair. On behalf of the Paraguayan delegation, we transmit our solidarity and the solidarity of the people of Paraguay to the sister republic of Argentina. Its dear people and esteemed Ambassador Raimundi, in the case of the failed assassination attempt of Cristina Fernandez Kirchner, who was president for 2 terms. We add our voice to those of the region in demanding justice in this case. Thank you. Thank you, Madam Chair. The permanent delegation of Ecuador joins in condemning, as the President of Ecuador, President Lasso, did in expressing condemnation of the attempted assassination of Cristina Fernandez Kirchner, expressing solidarity for the Argentinian president and people. We knew that the authorities in Argentina will do their best to get to the bottom of the event. Ecuador is a fervent believer in democracy and peace, and therefore rejects hate and violence in all of its forms, believing that dialogue and cooperation are the only mechanisms for working out differences. The people of Ecuador express solidarity with Mr. Raimundi and all of the people of Argentina. Thank you, Madam Chair. On behalf of the Colombian government, we reject the attempted magnicide of the former president of Argentina, Cristina Fernandez Kirchner, on September 1st in front of her home in Buenos Aires. The government of Colombia expressed its sincere solidarity with Vice President Fernandez, as well as any other type of hate and violence that undermine democratic values in our nations. Thank you, Madam Chair. Thank you, Chair. The delegation of Guatemala would like to thank Ambassador Carlos Alberto Raimundi for his intervention. The representative of Argentina, in referring to the unfortunate attempt against the life of the Vice President Cristina Fernandez Kirchner on September 1st of this year. Madam Chair, with respect to this unfortunate event, the Ministry of Foreign Relations of Guatemala expressed its solidarity with the government of Argentina for this attack against Vice President Cristina Fernandez Kirchner. We would like to reiterate our rejection of all acts of violence that are an attack against life and democracy, especially against democratically elected politicians.
Thank you, Madam Chair. The CARICOM members of the OAS stand for democracy, peace, and human rights. And an assassination attempt is not part of any of this. We therefore condemn the assassination attempt on the life of the Vice President of Argentina. There is no room for this in any democracy, and in fact, not in human society. We wish the people and government of Argentina peace and justice in all of this. Thank you, Madam Chair.
Perpetrado contra la vicepresidenta argentina, señora Cristina Fernández de Kirchner, este 1 de septiembre en la ciudad de Buenos Aires. El Gobierno de la República de Costa Rica condena este lamentable suceso y expresa su rechazo a todo tipo de violencia que atente contra la seguridad de los gobernantes y de sus habitantes en general. Asimismo, se hace un llamado para que las circunstancias de este atentado sean esclarecidas y se establezcan las responsabilidades dentro del marco de la legalidad. Muchas gracias, señora presidenta.
Thank you very much, Ambassador. I now recognize the United States.
Thank you, Madam Chair. The United States joins with our neighbors in strongly condemning the assassination attempt on Vice President Cristina Fernández de Kirchner. We stand with the Argentine government and the Argentine people in rejecting violence and rejecting hate. Thank you.
Thank you, United States. I now offer the floor to the Secretary General. I beg your pardon, mea culpa. I offer the floor to the Ambassador of Argentina.
Presidenta, es para agradecerle a usted haber incorporado este tema y en nombre de la República Argentina solo agradecerles de corazón las expresiones recibidas, nada más.
Thank you. I offer the floor to the Permanent Observer of Spain.
Gracias, señora presidenta. quiero compartir el pronunciamiento del presidente del Gobierno de España de rotunda condena al intento de magnicidio en Argentina y el apoyo a la vicepresidenta Cristina Fernández y a todo el pueblo argentino. El odio y la violencia jamás vencerán a la democracia. Los observadores de Francia, Italia y Santa Sede, por motivos de tiempo, me han pedido que en esta intervención también sume su sentimiento. Por tanto, en nombre de los 4 observadores permanentes de Francia, Italia, Santa Sede y España, traslado nuestro cariño y solidaridad, así como de forma enérgica y central la condena de la violencia y el odio. Gracias.
Thank you, Ambassador. I now offer the floor to the Secretary General.
Thank you, Madam Chair. En cualquier sociedad, pero especialmente en nuestras sociedades democráticas, los actos de violencia como instrumento, además de acción política, son absolutamente repudiables. El atentado contra la vida de Cristina Fernández de Kirchner es repudiable y condenable de cualquier manera y de todo punto de vista, desde cualquier posición política. Nuestras sociedades no pueden vivir en odio y violencia. Tienen que ser claras en no normalizar la violencia ni el conflicto. Sería trágico para cualquier sociedad que la agresión, el ataque personal, tratar de herir o matar a una persona, constituye una forma posible de acción social o política. Dejar que la violencia se transforme en un temperamento posible de una sociedad es inadmisible, es intolerable. Dejar que las emociones negativas prevalezcan sobre la racionalidad de los estados de ánimos y emocionales positivos que llevan a una sociedad a trabajar juntos, a tener propósitos comunes, a lograr cercanías, acuerdos, verdaderamente es el punto donde debemos ser cada vez más conscientes y más fuertes de que estas emociones positivas tienen que prevalecer sobre cualquier dimensión negativa. Queda para nosotros condenar nuevamente un atentado, pero más profundamente nos queda desterrar el discurso de odio y de violencia de nuestras sociedades. El discurso de odio con pautas de agresión verbal, escrita, oral, debe ser desterrado. En este caso, aquellos que afectan específicamente a Cristina Fernández. La violencia y atentados de esta naturaleza deben ser eliminados, porque afectan nuestra libertad, afectan nuestros derechos. No se puede predicar odio, porque el odio engendra violencia. El discurso de odio genera violencia en la sociedad, ya sea profunda o superficial. Nuestra solidaridad con Cristina Fernández de Kirchner respecto a estos ataques. Una mujer referente, fuerte, respeto.
Thank you. I see that there are no further requests for the floor. There being no further business to consider, this meeting is adjourned.